The time is 5:30. I'm going to call the April 25th, 2022 Plan Commission meeting to order. First, we will have some comments from our technical facilitator, Jesse.
All right, welcome to our virtual Plan Commission meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking the link or calling the number in your original email. To members and city staff, members, if you're able, please activate your video and keep it on for the duration of the meeting. Staff, if you're able, please activate your video when you are speaking. Use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak, ask questions. Staff, click raise hand when you are asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in the order in which their hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Members of the public who have registered to speak, the name you entered in Zoom must match the name you entered in registration. You will remain muted until called upon. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. After speaking, a member of the body may ask you a question. If you need to share documentation with the commission, please send it to the email listed in today's agenda. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Jesse. We do have a quorum. The first item of business is public comment. Heather, do we have any registrants for public comment other than the public hearings we have tonight? Seeing none. The next item of business is communications, disclosures, and recusals by members of the Plan Commission. If any of the Plan Commission members have any disclosures or recusals, please raise your hand. Seeing none. The next item of business is the minutes of the March 24th, 2022 special meeting. Are there any corrections or changes to the minutes of the special meeting? Raise your hand if so. Seeing none. And is there a motion to approve the minutes of the special meeting? Raise. Commissioner Solheim moves. Do we have a second? Commissioner Hagedorn seconds. All those in favor, I'll assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand. The special meeting minutes are approved. The next item is the minutes of the April 11th regular meeting of 2022. Are there any changes to the regular meeting minutes? Raise your hand if there are. Seeing no raised hands, is there a motion to approve the minutes? Motion by Commissioner Sondheim. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Fernandez. All those, I'm assuming unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand. Seeing no raised hands, the motion carries unanimously. The next item of business is the schedule of future meetings. Our next regular meetings are Monday, May 9th, Monday, May 23rd, June 13th, and June 27th. And then we will have a special meeting on Thursday, June 23rd at 5 p.m. The next item will be routine business, and the Plan Commission has items that we call that it can be considered on our consent agenda. Those include routine business and items that planning staff believes the applicant has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all the conditions placed on it by the various city departments. And the applicant has accepted all the conditions, and that there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition of those items tonight. The Plan Commission can remove items from the consent agenda if they so wish. On tonight's consent agenda, I will read the items, and if the commission would like to remove some of those items, we can do that in regular business. The consent items include item number 2, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. Do any of the commission members wish to remove any items from the consent? If so, raise your hand. Seeing none, we will proceed with the consent agenda, and I'll read each of those items and open the public hearing. On routine business, we have item number 2, Register 70899, determining a public purpose and necessity and adopting a relocation order for the acquisition of land interests required for the construction and maintenance of stormwater management facilities required for flood mitigation and restoration within the Mendota Grassman Greenway. Item number 5 is under public hearings, and I'll open the public hearings for all these items. Register 70878, approving the amendment to the project plan for tax increment district 36, Capitol Gateway in the city of Madison. Item number 6 is Register 70880, approving the amendment to the project plan for tax increment district 39, Stoughton Road, city of Madison. Item number 7, Register 70881, approving the amendment to project plan for tax increment district 42, Wingra, city of Madison. Under text amendments, we have item number 8, Register 70590, amending section 28.022, paren 3, paren C, paren of the Madison General Ordinances to update city floodplain maps. Item number 9, Register 70646, amending MGO 28.151, supplemental regulations for nightclub, restaurant, nightclub, and restaurant tavern. Our amended MGO 28.211, definition of nightclub, restaurant, tavern, and tavern are amended to allow food in taverns and nightclubs, amending table 28D-2 of MGO 28.061 to change brew pub, catering, incidental alcohol sales, and restaurant, tavern, and tavern for conditional to permitted uses in MX district. Moving to zoning map amendments and related requests, item number 14, Register 70657, creating section 28.022-00 of the Madison General Ordinance to rezone property located at 119 East Olin Avenue, 19th Aldermanic District, from Conservancy District to Parks and Recreation District. Under conditional uses request and demolition permits, item number 15, Register 69785, 3734 Speedway Road, 5th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to allow the demolition of a one-story commercial building. Item number 16, Register 70346, 929 East Washington Avenue, Urban Design District 8, 6th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the traditional employment district for a building exceeding 5 stories and 68 feet in height. Consideration of a conditional use in the TE district for dwelling units in a mixed-use building and consideration of a major alteration to a conditional use per section 28.137, paren 2, paren E, paren of the zoning code for a planned multi-use site containing a hotel, all to allow construction of a 14-story mixed-use building with approximately 96,800 square feet of commercial space and 105 apartments. Item number 17, Legislature 70538, 4914 Flom Road, 16th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the Industrial Limited District for a service building, hair salon. And items number 18 and 19 are related and are considered together. Item number 18 is Legislature 70537, 5109 Barton Road, 10th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish an existing pool house. And item number 19, Legislature 71081, 5109 Barton Road, 10th Alder District, consideration of a major alteration to an approved conditional use in suburban residential consistent one district to outdoor recreation, for outdoor recreation to allow construction of a new pool and pool house for Ridgewood Pool. Again, I'll open the public hearing on those. Seeing no one wishing to speak, I'll ask for a motion of approval of the consent agenda. Do we have a motion? Motion by
Uh-oh.
Brad, you're muted, I think.
Oh, I'm muted.
There we go.
Am I unmuted?
Now you're unmuted.
Yes,
Oh,
you're unmuted.
there you go.
I'm unmuted now, okay. We have a motion by Commissioner Sondheim. I'm assuming the motion is to approve the consent agenda. That's correct. Thank you, Commissioner Sondheim. And we have a second by Commissioner Hagenow to approve the consent agenda. Although I'll assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand in opposition. Seeing no raised hands, motion is approved unanimously. Okay. Moving on to the next items on the agenda that are not on consent. We have item under new business, item number 3, Legislature 70632, accepting the report titled Comprehensive Plan 2022 Progress Update. And we're having a presentation from Christy on staff.
Yes.
Christy, can you raise your hand so I can see where you're at? Thank you. Did I unmute you or did I unmute you?
I think I'm unmuted now.
Okay, good. Thank you. Proceed.
Excellent. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. Just one moment. Whoops. Start this. Okay, are y'all seeing the presenter mode or the notes?
In the notes.
Okay, let me swap this. Thank you. Okay. So I'm Kirsty Lodge. I work in the city's planning division. I use they, them pronouns, and I'm here to talk about the 2022 progress update for the comprehensive plan. This is our third annual progress update report for the comp plan. We create this document every spring to report back to the community on the progress that we've made toward implementing the recommendations in the comprehensive plan. And I wanted to mention that in putting this document together, we worked with many staff across city agencies. So I'm just one staff of many staff in the planning division that works on this report, and we coordinate with over 30 staff across other city agencies on this interagency effort. So here's the plan, which you all are probably pretty familiar with. The plan was adopted in August 2018 after more than 18 months of community engagement. And so for those that haven't heard this annual report out, this plan is the culmination of very extensive public participation to find out what matters most to residents and pull together recommendations into one plan document. And throughout the engagement process, we especially worked hard to make sure we were reaching underrepresented folks, BIPOC residents, folks living with lower incomes, and more. I'd love to talk a lot more about the engagement, but I'm not focusing on that tonight. But through this document, what we're doing is completing the feedback loop with those residents that we engaged with during the process. So during the Imagine Madison process, we received feedback from the community, incorporated that into the plan. Now we've spent the last 3 years taking action and implementing the plan. And this report helps us to close that feedback loop. So we're reporting out now on what's been accomplished, and we've been doing this every spring. So this is the third progress update. So I'm just going to kind of briefly run through the draft report. The comp plan has recommendations in 6 elements or 6 topic areas, as you can see in the bottom right of your screen. And I wanted to mention that in just a few weeks, staff will be entering a resolution to add a health and safety element as well. So that resolution will be entered, and over the course of the next few months, we hope to get that in place. But I'm going to just briefly run through each of the elements that we have of the 6 elements. So for land use and transportation, we're highlighting a spotlight project. And for each of the elements, we highlight a spotlight project, cover about 8 to 10 other highlights to try to keep a pretty concise document. Since the main audience for this document are members of the public, so we want to keep it concise and easy to use. So for land use and transportation, we're highlighting several gaps that were filled in the PED bike network. So the photos bridge over the Starkweather Creek, part of the Garver path that was implemented in 2021. I should also mention that if you're not familiar with these reports, they cover projects and other programs and things that were implemented during the course of the 2021 calendar year. So then in the other highlights, for land use and transportation, we highlight major advancements in BRT, which y'all are probably pretty familiar with, the 20 is Plenty program, and the West Washington Avenue reconstruction project, which made improvements for PED, bike, and transit infrastructure. And one of the other things I'll mention is that of the nearly 3,500 building permits that we issued in 2021, about 54% of those were located in infill and redevelopment areas, with the remainder being located in edge development areas or greenfield areas around the edges of the city. So that's something that we're tracking throughout this process, and was something that was brought up throughout the comprehensive plan process. And then for each element, we have a table that tracks all of the strategies and detailed actions. We've got 172 actions in total. So we have this table in the report that lists them all, lists the agencies, and then we keep track of the status in the far right column. And the status can range from not started, in progress, complete, or ongoing. So I'm not going to go into detail about all of these, but just want to make sure that I bring that to your attention. That's how we track the progress for each action. In the neighborhoods and housing section, the Housing Forward initiative is highlighted in the spotlight project there on the left side, which allowed for, one of the highlights is that it allowed for a wider variety of affordable housing types than through our typical funding streams. And then some of the other highlights include changes to expand what's allowed as a permitted use in the zoning ordinance and making ADUs permitted in most residential districts, which y'all are, I'm sure, quite familiar with. We also established the annual fund for land banking. We're highlighting the work here that was done to prevent evictions throughout 2021. And then the temporary structured campground site on Dairy Drive, which is an alternative shelter option for people experiencing homelessness. For the economy and opportunity section, the Spotlight Project is the Urban League's Black Business Hub, which made significant progress during 2021, which aims to address racial disparities in business ownership, which is going to be built on South Park Street. And then a few of the other items listed, we've got highlights that include the $10 million in federal funding to support out-of-school time programming, which allowed about 5,000 primarily BIPOC students to have high-quality programming during 2021 and out-of-school time. The extension of the Streetery program and establishment of Carts and Parks, the vending pilot program for that Carts and Parks program. For the culture and character element, we spotlight the Madlit event series. You can see one photo of that. I think is a pretty cool event up by the Capitol. So the series featured live music, shopping, food, art, and it highlighted the talents of BIPOC residents, many of which were impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic disproportionately, but have also been impacted by inequities in the music scene. So that event series aims to address some of those issues. And then a few of the other highlights that we've included, the Fiddlehead Fern Family public art piece and native garden, which is installed near Leopold Elementary. And this section also highlights the many other ways that the city is working to support local artists and strengthen the music sector in Madison. In terms of green and resilient, the spotlight here is the unveiling of the first and only electric fire engine in service in North America, which I think is pretty cool. I actually saw this fire engine on going out on a service call over the weekend, which was really exciting. So it's zero emissions and was made in Wisconsin by Pierce Manufacturing. And it helps, this electric fire engine helps us to reach the city's goal of 100% renewable energy and net zero carbon emissions by 2030. And then in terms of just some other highlights in the Green and Resilient chapter, we created and started to work on some more detailed stormwater management plans for watersheds across the city. We installed a bike pump track at Leopold Park, which is shown there in the bottom right photo. It's the first piece of the Madison Bicycle Adventure Trail Network, or the MadBat Network. And then in addition, we implemented the city's first ever set of beehives that the city manages to help promote healthy pollinator habitats. Then the final of the 6 elements, if the effective government section spotlights mobile vaccination efforts, which were of course very important during 2021, particularly to helping eliminate barriers to accessing the vaccine. And then a few of the other highlights include successfully piloting the Community Alternative Response for Emergency Services, or CARES program, which dispatches a paramedic and crisis worker rather than law enforcement to calls involving mental or behavioral health, with the focus on de-escalation. So you can see a photo of some staff with their vehicle in the bottom right there. And in addition, the city added 3 staff positions called community connectors, and those staff will help us to expand language translation, interpretation, and outreach to residents that speak Spanish, Hmong, and Mandarin. So those are all 6 elements in just kind of a brief rundown. I wanted to mention that we have taken this to TPPB, Transportation Policy and Planning Board. They recommended approval and did not provide any additional feedback. Yeah, that's all I really have. Happy to turn it back over to the chair and happy to take questions and any comments you may have.
Thank you, Christy. Do any of the commission members have any questions for Christy? If so, please raise your hand. Seeing no raised hands, do we have a motion on this item? Please raise your hand if for a motion. Yes, Commissioner Peck.
Yes, I'll move that we accept the report.
Okay, do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Fernandez. Would you like to speak to your motion? Yes, okay.
Just very briefly, I wanted to thank Christy for their presentation and also all of planning staff. I think that our being reminded of everything in Imagine Madison occasionally is very helpful, since it does help to guide us as we make decisions. And I appreciate hearing about the progress we're making. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Heck. Commissioner Fernandez, would you like to speak? Seeing.
No, thank you. No, thanks. I'm fine.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Christy, thank you for an excellent report. I think it was well presented, and again, thanks planning staff as well. We've accomplished a lot over the course of this time. I'll assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand to object. Seeing no raised hands, the motion is approved unanimously. We'll move on to the next item. Thanks again, Christy. The next item is item number 4, Register 70654, amending the Yahara Hills Neighborhood Development Plan, a supplement to the City of Madison's comprehensive plan to provide updated recommendations of the area located on the easterly portion of the Yahara Hills Golf Course. We'll have a staff presentation of Urvashi Martin. Yes. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead, share my screen here. Okay. Good evening, everyone. I'm Urvashi Martin with the Planning Division, here to present the amendment to the Yahara Hills Neighborhood Development Plan. I'm also joined here with my colleague, Jeff Greger, for this item. So what we're going to be covering in tonight's presentation, give you a little bit of background about this plan amendment, share some of the draft recommendations for this amendment, summarize some of the public feedback that we received, describe some of the next steps with this process, and then we'll be available to answer your questions. So why are we considering this amendment to the Yahara Hills Neighborhood Development Plan? There's a proposed project on the eastern portion of the Yahara Hills Golf Course for a new Dane County landfill, sustainable business park, and composting facility. The Yahara Hills Neighborhood Development Plan that covers that area is not consistent with what is being proposed, and that's the reason why we are considering this amendment to the plan. A little bit of background about the Yahara Hills Neighborhood Development Plan. This was adopted a few years back in 2017. The map on the right here is showing the planning area for the Yahara Hills Neighborhood Development Plan. The amendment area that we're looking at is shown on the red outline on the map here. So generally covering the portion of the planning area where the project is being proposed. So a small portion of the overall planning area. A little bit about the amendment area itself. It's bounded by 1218 to the north, County Trunk Highway AB to the east, Seagull Cow Road to the south, following the interstate and property lines to the west. Area-wise, this amendment area is approximately 332 acres. So what we've tried to focus with this plan amendment is we have tried to evaluate the land uses, transportation, and ped bike facilities that were recommended in the 2017 plan in the context of this proposed project and provided recommendations. So for the draft land use recommendations, the land use recommendations that the 2017 plan had recommended are shown on the map in the upper right-hand side here. So generally the amendment area and the area to the west of that was recommended in the 2017 plan for parks and open space. So generally the Yahara Hills Golf Course site and the parcels to the south of that was recommended for a community park in the 2017 plan. What we are proposing with this plan amendment is the site where the project is being proposed, changing the land use designation from parks and open space to industrial use. The area that would be around the landfill, which would exist as a buffer area, we are recommending changing that to other open space. And the parcels to the south here, where the 2017 plan had recommended for a community park, in the context of this proposed project, we are recommending changing the designation from parks and open space to other open space. For transportation recommendations, we are not making too many changes to the transportation recommendations from what was recommended in the 2017 plan. The 2017 plan had recommended a southern loop road to this area and to the Ho-Chunk area as a secondary access. We are continuing to show that recommendation. Right now, this area just has one access and egress road. So we are recommending that that southern loop road be shown as a secondary access to this area to address some of those accessibility issues. For ped bike crossings, the 2017 plan had recommended two ped bike crossings in this area. So these are shown here. A ped bike crossing was recommended at this location over the interstate to connect to this area, connect some of the neighborhoods here to the west through that crossing. And then another crossing was recommended over 1218 and then continue north to connect with the regional trail network. We are making slight modifications to those locations. We are recommending that the crossing that was shown over the interstate, moving that slightly to the southeast here, Wyostoke Road at this location. The 2017 plan had also recommended a street crossing in this general vicinity. We had some discussions with the transportation department and our engineering department, and also with the MPO regarding these locations. The general consensus was instead of showing the street crossing in this area, we should show the ped bike crossing at this location. For the crossing over 1218, that is where my cursor is, we are recommending moving that location slightly to the east here to align with the Meyer Road right away. Also, as part of this amendment, we also looked at what some of the visual impacts would be of the proposed project on the surrounding land uses. So we've included language in the plan text regarding buffer and screening that should be provided around the landfill to ensure compatibility with adjacent land uses. We are recommending that a buffer, a minimum 150 feet buffer should exist around the landfill that could consist of a landscape berm minimum 10 feet tall, and should be a landscape with a variety of species of trees, but at a minimum should have 75% evergreen trees to make sure there's natural screening available for all seasons of the year. This image here is illustrating that buffer section. So this is the buffer section between the landfill and County Trunk Highway AB. We're envisioning a similar buffer section on the other side as well between the golf course and the landfill. Also, Dane County staff, they put together some visuals to illustrate what the views would be from the surrounding areas. These images are modeled after the existing Rodefeld landfill. So they're using the maximum elevation of the existing Rodefeld landfill to show what the views of the proposed landfill would be from the surrounding areas. So what we are looking at here in these slides is an existing view on the upper right-hand side showing what the area looks like today. There's a location map underneath that to show where we are. And the larger image to the left is showing what the views would be of the proposed landfill from the surrounding areas. So these images are really showing what the views would be way into the future, so decades down the road when the proposed landfill is reaching its maximum elevation and capacity and is ready to be capped. So the view that we're looking at here is at Mill Pond Road and Highway 1218. So we are looking southeast here. So you can see the proposed landfill here at the distance with the vegetation in front of that. The next view that we're looking at here is from the neighborhoods here to the west. So we're looking east and northeast here. In this image, you can see, you can also see the existing Rodefeld landfill at a distance with its maximum elevation. Slightly to the right here is where the proposed landfill would be with the vegetation in front of that. The next view that we have here is at Hope Hollow Road and County Trunk Highway AB. So we are looking north here straight towards the existing Rodefeld landfill. And the proposed landfill is to our left here with the vegetation along AB. We also had a neighborhood meeting for this plan amendment on March 17th. There were some concerns and questions that were brought up at this meeting regarding the proposed project. So some of the concerns that residents expressed were regarding the impact the project would have on the property values. There were some concerns raised about why this location was selected, what alternative locations were considered. There were some questions regarding what measures of air quality control will be in place, how smell and odor will be managed at the site, and also if there will be any impacts to property owners, private wells, and drinking water. We had Dane County staff also in attendance at this meeting, and they listened to the concerns and also responded to the questions. The feedback that we received from the boards, commissions, and committees for this plan amendment, the plan amendment was referred to the Transportation Policy and Planning Board and also to the Board of Parks Commission. The Transportation Policy and Planning Board directed staff to evaluate the interstate overpass location and also some of the bike paths that would connect the Marsh Road neighborhood as part of the Marsh Road Neighborhood Development Plan update process. For the Board of Parks Commission, we did not get any additional feedback on the plan amendment. The timeline that we're looking at for this plan amendment, we had the neighborhood meeting on March 17th. The plan amendment was introduced to the council on March 29th. We presented the plan amendment to the Board of Parks Commission at their April 13th meeting. And to the Transportation Policy and Planning Board at their April 18th meeting. We are here before you tonight. And then this plan amendment would be going to the Common Council for their review and consideration of adoption at the May 10th meeting. So that concludes my presentation, and we're available here for questions.
Thank you. Do any of the commission members have any questions for Abrishi? Yes, Commissioner Fernandez.
I do. Yeah, thank you. So, thanks for the presentation. I guess I'm a little bit concerned about the effects on the current golf course. They seem to be pretty dramatic. And I'm not saying this as a golfer, but as a person who appreciates parks and open space. And yet I noticed that Parks had no comments on this. Can you speak a little bit to Parks' involvement in this? Will this cost Parks extra money to reconfigure? Will they lose a substantial portion of this golf course? And what will compensate for that?
So there was a task force that had recommended in 2019 that 18 holes of the Yahara Hills Golf Course should be closed. That was a recommendation from the task force that the 18 holes out of the 36 holes should be closed. And that's the consideration for this project. So the 18 holes would still be in operation. As far as with the plan amendment, we're trying to include language regarding the buffer and the screening that should exist between the golf course and the landfill. As far as the discussion at the Parks Commission, the same night that we presented the plan amendment, also the land sale agreements were also being discussed at that meeting, and so some of the discussion regarding the recommendation from the task force and also the financial operation piece regarding that were also covered at that topic, but not covered with the plan amendment discussion.
Okay, well, thank you. I'm in a general way, I'm concerned about the loss, but it's always hard to cite a landfill, and it sounds like if Parks is totally on board with this, that's more their bailiwick than mine. So thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other commission members that have questions for staff? I have a question for you. What is defined as other open space, which is the southern kind of area of the plan amendment?
Yeah, so for the parks and open space, we generally look at recreational uses. So the other open space could cover areas that exist as natural features or areas that are recommended for stormwater management. And other green spaces or buffer areas usually are recommended within that other open space category.
Okay, well, thank you much. Any other comments or questions for the commission? Yes, Heather.
Yes, I just wanted to mention that we had some late registrants from the county who are here and able to answer questions as well. Roxanne Winks and John Welch, and they're just registered again to answer questions if needed.
Okay, good. Thank you, Heather. Are there any questions for those registrants? I guess seeing none, do we have a motion on this item? Yes, Commissioner Sondheim.
I will move approval of the amendment to the Yahara Hills Neighborhood Development Plan.
Thank you. Do we have a second? Second by Commissioner Heck. Thank you. Would you like to speak to your motion, Commissioner Sondheim?
No, thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
So I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand in opposition. Seeing no raised hands, the motion is approved unanimously. Moving on to the next item on the agenda. Actually, we have several related items that will be taken, considered all together. Those are items 10, 11, 12, and 13, and I will read them and then open the public hearing. Item number 10 is Legistar 69937, amending the Shank Atwood Starkweather Worthington Park Neighborhood Plan to add a land use recommendation for northern half of the block bounded by Linden Avenue, Atwood Avenue, Division Street, and Dunning Street for the future redevelopment to be medium residential as shown on the plan amendment and map. Item number 11, Legistar 70655, creating sections 28.022-00560 of the Madison General Ordinances to rezone property located at 2165 Linden Avenue, 15th Aldermanic District, from traditional residential varied 1 district to planned development, general development plan, and creating sections 28.022-00561 to approve a specific implementation plan. Item number 12, Legislar 69790, 2165 Linden Avenue, 15th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to allow demolition of a place of worship. And lastly, item 13, Legislar 69799, approving a certified survey map of property owned by Threshold Development LLC, located at 2165 Linden Avenue in the 15th Alder District. We will first have a presentation by city staff. Colin?
Yes, thank you. Apologies. This is a multifaceted proposal, so my overview is a little longer than normal. But as Chair Cantrell said, the applicant's requesting approval of a demolition permit to raise a vacant house of worship, and then approval of the zoning map amendment from TRV1 to PD GDP SIP, all to construct a 3-story residential building with 32 units and 44 structured parking stalls. There is also the approval of a CSM to dissolve the underlying lot lines. Due to declining membership of the Zion faith community, the existing building is no longer needed by that congregation. The Zion congregation has now merged with another church and will be basing their activities out of that facility. The comprehensive plan recommends low residential for the site. The LR designation is predominantly single family and 2-unit structures with some smaller 3 and 4 unit structures and row houses. The Shank Atwood Starkweather Worthington Park neighborhood plan provides no specific redevelopment recommendations for the site. At the time, it was assumed that the congregation and subsequently the church building would remain. An amendment to the neighborhood plan introduced by Alder Foster and prepared by planning staff is under consideration simultaneously with the land use application requests. The amendment notes that as institutional uses such as Zion Lutheran Church near the end of their useful lives, many of these sites may be targeted for adaptive reuse or redevelopment with residential uses, and due to their size are candidates for a larger or more intensive residential development. Specifically regarding the redevelopment of this site, the draft plan amendment recommends residential redevelopment of no more than 3 stories and 70 dwelling units per acre. The Planning Division recommends that the Plan Commission consider the plan amendment first, and if supportive, make a recommendation to Common Council for adoption in a motion separate from the motion for the development proposal. In regards to the development proposal, the request is for plan development zoning, and staff emphasizes that the Plan Commission should make clear and specific findings for the relevant standards and cite the reasons for which they are either supported or not supported. In the staff report, staff has raised considerations of plan development standards A, E, and F. Standard A is related to the utilization of plan development zoning. The report notes that TRU1 zoning could allow for a similar, though slightly smaller, development pattern. Other conventional districts could establish another similar development pattern, though other districts may allow a greater density height or possibly other uses such as commercial uses, which are not recommended in the existing plans or the proposed plan amendment. Of important note, within Standard A, the applicant is citing compliance with the sustainability objective of the plan development district to justify the use of PD zoning, and applying that specifically to their commitment to passive house design and other sustainability efforts. Standard E requires a development's aesthetic desirability compatible with the existing or planned character of the neighborhood. The UDC provided comments regarding building design and siting and recommended initial approval of the application. Regarding Standard F, which deals with open space, staff has expressed concerns about the size and quality of the usable open space, though within the PD district there is not a required minimum area. The UDC also provided a favorable recommendation on this aspect. And then finally, regarding the, or if the Plan Commission can find that the plan development standards can be met, then the Planning Division recommends that the Commission also find that the applicable standards for zoning map amendments are met. And regardless, staff does also believe that the standards for demolition permits and certified survey maps can be met. And then staff notes, due to the complexity of the request, again, that the Commission states clear findings and reasons in its motions, and that it consider the neighborhood plan amendment first as a separate motion, and then the development proposal itself second with its own motion. And again, as always, I am happy to answer questions after the public hearing.
Thank you, Colin. I will open the public hearing, and the first registrants will be the development team, and we'll first start off with Kevin Burrows. Kevin is with Kanothi and Bruce Architects, and obviously he's in support. So Kevin, you have 3 minutes.
All right, good evening. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. I appreciate your time this evening on this redevelopment proposal for the Zion Church property as shown in the center of the screen there. This is just on the back side of the block that runs along Atwood Avenue, as you can see. So we're bounded by Dunning, Linden, and Division Streets. If you can go to the next slide, please. What we are proposing is a solution that has been arrived at through numerous meetings with the local neighbors, smaller groups, larger groups, with the alder persons, and also the neighborhood committees as well. So we are proposing a transition to 3-story housing building, which occupies the block here and is been designed to be intended to be passive house certified. And there'll be more information presented on that by other presenters. But we are looking at basically a 3-story building with underground parking accessed off of Dunning Street on the right-hand side. If you go to the next slide, please. We are able to achieve one-to-one parking per bedroom. So out of the 32 units, we have 10 two-bedroom units. So we are providing 42 parking stalls, which again was a major concern of the neighborhood. And to achieve this, we are utilizing a stacked parking scenario. So each of the two bedrooms would have a stacked parking area where they can have one car stacked above their other car. You go to the next slide, please. On the far right-hand side is our main entry then, accessed off of Dunning with the accessible entrance and stairs. And we also do have private entries for all the first floor apartments along Division and Linden as well through accessible front porches. And then behind the main entry is a community space. If you go to the next slide, please. On second floor, it's just a mixture of studios, ones and two bedrooms. Next slide, please. Then on the third floor, here is where we are stepping the building back. And this has actually been enhanced over recent through negotiations with the neighbors to increase the step back. And it's also recommended by UDC such that the third floor disappears more from the street view along Linden Avenue. And this is where we are utilizing much of the roof space for green roof areas. And then the balance will be located on the uppermost roof. You go to the next slide, please. So the exterior design really was a negotiation with all the constituents, as I mentioned earlier, to achieve a townhome type look and feel. To access the underground parking, we're utilizing a shared access point between the Cornerstone building along Atwood and this new proposed development with the main lobby shown here in the front corner. Can you go to the next slide, please? Here you'll see a view looking down Linden Avenue. As you can now see or not see, the third floor has been stepped back such that it is recessed from view as you're approaching this building on the street. And then again, each of these units do have separate entries. If you go to the next slide. The overall design intent here is to create a townhome type feel to feel and scale and context and density to this existing neighborhood. So we've utilized a variety of materials and colors to achieve this townhome look. Go to the next slide, please. As I mentioned, each of the units have direct entry.
I'm sorry, your time limit is up. The next speaker will be Joe Kropp with the development team.
Actually, I'm passing my time to Tyler, my son, who's going to make the presentation.
Okay, that's Tyler Kropp, and again, representing the development team in Atwood Avenue in Madison.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you, yes.
Thank you. Thank you for your time. My name is Tyler Kropp. I'm the development lead for Threshold Development. Threshold Development is a second-generation development company founded by Joe Kropp, my father, Sophia Qureshi, my wife, and myself. It was founded with the explicit intention of building upon the urban infill multifamily development that Joe's done for 40 plus years, with the hope of pushing the boundaries of sustainability in Madison. Prior to joining this development company, my wife and I worked in nonprofits focusing on environmental education and community wellness. Next slide, please. Next slide. I want to give you a little background for how we got to this PD request. How did we get here? My sense is it was in response to a bunch of constituents' needs. Colin's already explained the needs of Zion Lutheran. Next slide. There was a long neighborhood engagement process where our design evolved in relation to what we interpreted as the neighborhood needs. Next slide, please. Our current design reflects kind of that negotiation between Zion's needs, the neighborhood's needs, UDC recommendations, passive house consultant recommendations. We feel like we've really tried to kind of walk that line and honor our commitments to everybody. Next slide, please. We intend to respond to UDC's suggestions for the final UDC submittal. Next slide. I want to emphasize our rationale for this PD request. Primarily, it was driven by guidance from city staff, and my understanding of their guidance was the PD really restricts the density that we can achieve on this site. So it was not requested in an effort to increase density on the site. Rather, it was viewed as the way to build trust with constituents, neighborhood, prior consensus agreements, that we wouldn't build beyond what we had proposed. Next slide, please. We think we meet the general and specific standards for the PD. We want to emphasize element number A, which is the sustainability requirements. Next slide, please. We feel next slide. Sorry. We feel like we're offering an exemplary sustainable project, and if this project doesn't meet the standards of innovative sustainability, we're not sure what would. To that end, there's been some suggestions that passive house isn't a legitimate standard, and we're not sincere in our pursuit of it. So we've invited two of our passive house partners to explain a bit more about what the passive house standard is and why it's worth pursuing. One of those partners, Tim McDonald from Onions Flats, is here to speak. Our other partner was unavailable tonight, but she could be reached for further comment. In terms of our sincerity, I want to direct your attention to a letter submitted by our contractor, which testifies that we've been pursuing this sustainable innovation for about a year in conversation with him, despite his advice that it was financially imprudent.
Chair Cantrell, I'm sorry, that's time.
Okay, thank you. Your 3 minutes is up. Thank you. The next speaker will be Timothy McDonald on North Front Street in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, representing the development team. Tim, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you very much. So I've been brought on as a part of the design and architecture team. We will be the design architect working with the architect of record on this. We are also developers, architects, and builders of primarily passive house structures. Next slide, please. And we started our practice 25 years ago, and we built some of the first LEED Gold and Platinum projects in the country. This is the first LEED Platinum duplexes in the country. Next. And without going into detail about this project, this is about an 11-unit project. We focus a lot on mechanical systems, on stormwater management, on energy efficiency. Next slide. And that translates, especially in urban environments, into really using the roof of a building to do a lot of work, generate power, generate hot water, manage stormwater, and create green space. Next slide. This is that project, the Thin Flats project that we completed in 2008, which won many awards, national and international awards. Next slide. And the nature of LEED is such that it's a holistic sustainability program. And when I say holistic, I'm not just talking about energy. It's about water. It's about where materials come from and so forth. But what we discovered after building many, many LEED projects was that the most difficult part of any building had to do with energy. Next slide. Next slide. And the reason for that, and the reason why it's difficult and challenging, is because buildings are responsible for almost half of all greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide. And urban environments are responsible for 3/4 of all greenhouse gas emissions. And if we think we'll have the opportunity to change the climate change scenario, we have to act with buildings in urban environments. Next slide. I call it next slide. Next slide. I'm just going to jump to some examples. Next slide. Carbon neutral buildings are what we have to build by 2040. And I believe that this team is totally committed to making that happen. Next slide. And that means that buildings need to generate what they require on their own site. Next slide. And so here's an example of a building that uses this much energy, but it would, next slide, need a roof this big to generate what it needed. Next slide. But it doesn't have that. It has 80% less than that. And so that is what we're really focused on. Next slide. Heating and cooling this building requires more than 50% of all energy. Next slide. And the best way to address that is with a super insulated and airtight coat, which is what,
Tim,
next slide.
Your 3 minutes is up.
Okay.
Thank you for your comments. And I'm going to remind all the speakers, we're combining all the public hearings, so the plan and the development into one public hearing. So you should speak to them collectively if you wish. But the next speaker is Sandy Blankeny on Linden Avenue in Madison, opposing the project. Again, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. You can hear me okay?
Yes, Sandy, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. On item 10, the NPA, I asked the Plan Commission to deny this amendment to the neighborhood plan. A neighborhood plan is designed to lay out goals and a vision for the future of the neighborhood with strategies for accomplishing those goals. This draft amendment was created hastily with little attention to its purpose. It appears to be designed only to support the application for a PD district by one developer for a zoning change for 1/2 of one block. The only reason this amendment was drafted was to give the impression that the developer's proposal is consistent with the neighborhood plan. Because the application requires that consistency for PD zoning, it would never have been drafted otherwise, and is a cynical perversion of the very purpose of a neighborhood plan. Even the UDC asked if this was just an end run to get the development approved. So I would ask that you deny that one. And in terms of the application, I would also ask that you deny this application. The developer says that they aim to achieve objective A, the sustainability objective, and their entire application hinges on achieving that. And their application, though, while they note that passive housing construction is best practice and solar energy helps attain net zero energy use, they make no commitment to implement these practices. In fact, they have said that, they're learning about it, but they will not commit to actually doing it. At the UDC, the commissioners comments included that they actually made it worse and that they misunderstood what we had asked for and that there was legitimate question as to whether this was just talk. The UDC did vote for it to make initial approval after the developer said that if there were any further delay or reduction in scale, they would need to walk away from the project. So good intentions alone are not enough to support this zoning change. And I would ask that you not approve this. It is really being made for the sole purpose of increasing overall density, and there's nothing unique about the closure of a church that's only 50 years old. If you do approve this application, I would ask that you make it contingent on, first, that the applicant provide details about how green building techniques, stormwater management, and other sustainable measures will be implemented. Second, that they commit to those measures. And third, that they work to create a true transition from taller Atwood buildings to the surrounding residential neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you, Sandy. The next speaker is Bruce Becker on Dunning Street in Madison, opposed to the project. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll make this brief. I just want to make it clear that as a member of the neighborhood committee that discussed this, no agreement, no consensus, and no compromise was reached between the developer and the neighborhood. And I think I'm just really tired of hearing them say that there was. They're addressing the neighborhood plan. Now, this neighborhood plan hasn't been amended in 22 years. Why start now for one parcel, for one developer, and one plan? Also, it's not consistent with the city comprehensive plan. My third point is that we believe that developers should be encouraged to build green, but planned development zoning is not necessary to build green. It can be done in any zoning district. And the last thing I want to point out is that green building and sustainability and passive housing, many terms are in there, including sustainability. But the fact is that the code refers specifically to green building, not to passive housing, not to LEED. Maybe Tim McDonald can be called back to explain to you what the difference is between green building and passive housing. So Oh, and one last thing is I really encourage you to require that certification of some kind be obtained so you don't end up with a toxic environment in that building. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce. The next speaker is Barbara Becker on Dunning Street in Madison. Opposed, you have 3 minutes.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity to speak. There are many interwoven parts to this application and the request for rezoning. We trust the commission members have read the many thoughtful written comments that address concerns in greater depth. We've been told that this project cannot move forward without the neighborhood plan amendment. We question whether that's an appropriate means to change zoning. The comp plan is there for a reason and shouldn't be circumvented and superseded by a neighborhood plan amendment in order to satisfy a single plan of redevelopment. Our biggest concern is that this development is not transitional to the surrounding neighborhood. It is not in keeping with one of the stated strategies of the comprehensive plan, which is to ensure that redevelopment is well integrated into adjacent low-density residential areas. While close by, Dunning Street, Linden Avenue, and Division Street are not Atwood Avenue. They are residential streets lined with traditional 1- and 2-unit residential dwellings. In scale and density, the proposed development is not transitional to 85% of the surrounding properties. In comparison to those properties, it is massive. If the city's goals include the quality of the entire neighborhood, the Zion parcel should be utilized for compatible residential development under the existing TRV1 zoning, except for Cornerstone, which is designated neighborhood mixed use in the comprehensive plan. All of the surrounding properties are designated low residential. The neighborhood plan amendment bypasses what might be an appropriate transition to low medium residential and jumps to the next classification, medium residential. Again, not transitional and solely to accommodate the proposed development. Although it may have no bearing on the Plan Commission's determination on zoning or approval of the development, we're compelled to comment on the involvement of the neighborhood and in particular, the immediate neighbors. As part of a group of immediate neighbors involved in the discussions, we take exception to the applicant's representation. In the first letter of intent, it was stated the project evolved through these discussions and the final resulting design was based on a joint consensus reached with all parties. The current letter of intent states the project evolved through these discussions and the final resulting design was based on an iterative process arrived at through collaboration with all parties. That is some fancy talk, but the commission should know that there was no consensus and no substantive compromise. It is simply disingenuous to continue to publicly claim that there was. We appeal to you today to reject the rezoning request, land use application, and the amendment needed to build the proposed development. We are asking the city to work to pursue a reasonable development in truly transitional scale to the neighboring homes that surrounds the bulk of this parcel. The commission can recognize the need for redevelopment while at the same time preserving the character of the neighborhood into which it will be received. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Thomas Leibel in opposition at Linden Avenue in Madison. You have 3 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, Thomas, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. Commission members and alders, I'm going to address items 10 and 11. First 10, I think. This neighborhood plan amendment has appeared on a frantically rushed timeline, concurrent with an open PD application. There was a hasty introduction of a broadly worded amendment, awkwardly followed by a revision and reintroduction. And in the absence of any serious neighborhood engagement, no endorsement by the Sassy Neighborhood Association Board, and broad community opposition, it is unsupportable. Site-specific amendments such as this can only invite interpretation as special interest carve-outs. This is very poor planning practice. Any new zoning policy change should be seriously examined for potential long-term impacts given a broad public hearing, and applied on a citywide basis. By the letter and intent of the PD ordinance, any qualifying proposal must surmount a very high bar. To sidestep the conventional rezoning process without clear, just cause brings into question the validity of the city's planning process and undermines a citizen's institutional confidence. As evidence in submitted documents shows, this proposal fails to satisfy the most primary and important requirements of the PD ordinance and can only make a weak attempt to satisfy the most minor and subjective ones. This proposal would be appropriate in areas already zoned for its scale, given the recent and ongoing building boom along Winnebago Street, Atwood, Fair Oaks, and East Washington Avenues. The siting opportunities are many. The Zion parcel is a long-standing and valuable part of the Hawthorne Park neighborhood. Because of its long history and stability, these few square blocks have become host to a vibrant, verdant, natural system, which thrives along and above the historic built environment. Just because this site is on the perimeter of the neighborhood does not make it any less important in maintaining the core's ecological integrity. This week alone, I have seen a fox, a possum, and countless migratory songbirds cross my yard. Tragically, this PD proposal would cap and seal the entire Zion site, a concrete parking structure topped with a 3-story apartment block, no backyards, no side yards, no canopy shade trees, no natural rainwater infiltration, no wildlife. No amount of window dressing or greenwashing will reduce this permanent negative impact. Zoning policy is much more than housing policy. This entire neighborhood has become a valuable de facto park and recreational space for the many occupants of nearby developments that don't typically offer similar amenities.
Thank you, Thomas.
Your carving out of a
your 3 minutes are up. Thank you very much for your comments. The next speaker is Ed Niles, in support on Linden Avenue in Madison. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, thanks for hearing from me tonight. I wanted to speak in support of items 10 and 11. As you're likely aware, the current Shank Atwood Starkweather Worthington neighborhood plan is over 20 years old, and the city's just seen immense change over that time. I doubt anybody who was putting the plan together in 2000 could have anticipated the sheer amount of population growth we've experienced. And so the current plan, while it does provide some very specific examples in it of site-based guidance, fails to provide much general guidance for institutional sites like churches or schools that have reached their end of life. And I think that's why Alder Foster put this forward. Quite frankly, neglecting to update the neighborhood plan with guidance for an institutional site like the Mount Zion Church parcel, which has already been sold and will certainly be repurposed, would be irresponsible. And I think that's why city staff has asked to separate this out, whether there's objections to the project, that we do amend the neighborhood plan. Given the city's current deficit of available housing units and considering the use and size of those nearby parcels, I think the amendment as proposed adheres to the core neighborhood values expressed in the original neighborhood plan, while providing appropriate guidance for this committee and others to consider when assessing any future development on the site. Speaking to the project and the change in zoning from TRV1 to PD at 2165 Linden to advance the development of that multifamily building, I think that given the current housing crisis, the city should be doing everything possible to strongly encourage reasonably dense development on this parcel. We need to support smart infill development projects like this one, especially ones that are pushing the boundary on environmental design. And we definitely need increased density and housing supply in this neighborhood desperately. The project represents an incredibly good land use for an available underutilized parcel like Mount Zion's, especially when it's adjacent to dense mixed-use buildings on a main road and is within a highly walkable neighborhood supported by recently upgraded utilities and conveniently close to the BRT and bike infrastructure the city's investing in. Just to make a few points of context, there was a long and torturous opportunity for the neighborhood to provide feedback to the developers, and quite frankly, the city should be commending this developer on their attempts to fully engage in a conversation with the neighborhood that contains such a wide diversity of viewpoints. The UDC granted their initial approval of a PD for this site, and they specifically noted that the mass and scale of the project was acceptable for the site and the neighborhood, and that nearby green spaces helped ameliorate any concerns with the small scale of the green space on the site. So in summary, I just encourage you all to support the proposed change to PD and the project and move it forward.
Thank you, Ed. That's your time limit is up. The next speaker is Terry Cohn. He's opposed and he resides on Linden Avenue in Madison. Terry, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. And this is Terry Cohn. I'm a she. I urge you to not support. That's okay. I urge you to not support items 10 and 11. You have read and heard from my neighbors why this proposal does not meet the purposes standards for a PD, including the report from the UDC as to the many questions and problems with it. Your mission to make, quote, recommendations to the Common Council on various plans, including the comprehensive plan, unquote, to me means to responsibly plan for the big picture of meeting the values of our neighborhood and goals of the city of Madison. It is not to cherry pick an individual parcel to meet the goals of a particular developer who chooses not to build under the current zoning. It is not to increase density in a permanent, inconsistent, detrimental way that will not solve what some claim is a housing crisis. I look at this as a missed opportunity to actually work towards the goals of the City of Madison's comprehensive plan. The comprehensive plan lists 12 goals. One of the goals for our neighborhoods and housing is, quote, Madison will have a full range of quality and affordable housing opportunities throughout the city, page 12. This proposal further fails to meet the generalized future land use. Quote, the general density range is intentionally broad for most categories because building form, not density, should be the primary consideration when determining whether a building fits appropriately within a given neighborhood, district, or corridor. This proposal does not fit with the surrounding 1- and 2-story residential homes. Quote, multifamily residential development should contain a mixture of unit sizes, including 3-bedroom or larger units, page 24. This proposal has the majority studio and 1-bedroom. There are no 3-bedroom units. Quote, while more intense forms of multifamily or mixed-use development may occur as mapped along major corridors adjacent to or running through LR areas, any infill or redevelopment that occurs within an LR area should be compatible with established neighborhood scale, page 24. This building is not transitional or in scale with the surrounding single homes in an LR neighborhood. The neighborhood is not against development on the site. 2165 Linden Avenue is already zoned for an increased density of 12 to 13 units that can be sensitively developed with green space and families. The current proposal of 32 units has little green space and no units conducive to families. I challenge all of you to adhere to the goals of the city plan recommends and to the intent and specific purpose and objectives for a PD, and not to a developer who is attempting to use words to simply sustainable building in order to increase density and build a massive incongruous building with good intentions, or maybe an oops, I forgot to check that there's even enough sunlight for the solar panels to achieve that special rezone. The Alders Neighborhood Plan Amendment neither addresses the goals or visions of a neighborhood plan nor the goals of the Madison Comprehensive Plan. It has singled out a single parcel for a particular development to benefit a particular developer with no neighborhood discussions.
Thank you, Terry. Your 3 minutes are up. The next speaker is Susan Boston Young, opposed on Division Street. You have in the city of Madison. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Plan Commission members, for considering these public comments on agenda items 10 and 11. Neighbors have been opposed to this development since first hearing details of it in May of 2021, but we are not opposed to redevelopment of this parcel. Rather, we support development that will meet the goals of both the existing neighborhood plan and the comprehensive plan, and I do too. Immediate neighbors have worked to be engaged city residents seeking meaningful opportunities for participation in decisions which affect our neighborhood and the city as a whole, and frankly, which we have not gotten through our current alder or neighborhood association. So through self-organized surveying and many, many conversations and meetings, neighbors have identified what we seek in a development. And collectively, we know the benefits of our neighborhood, and we need new housing that provides those benefits to any new residents. We expect affordable housing. We expect owner-occupied housing to expand wealth building opportunities for housing disadvantaged people. We expect units for all people, for families of 8 and for families of 1. We expect buildings which transition from arterial streets like Atwood to 1- and 2-story homes on residential streets like Linden. We expect some traffic calming. We expect infill projects that result in high quality buildings and spaces and harmonious design relationships with older buildings. We expect preservation of defining views of the lakes and downtown and the capital. And we expect integration of vegetation into the built environment with terrace plantings, green roofs, living walls, and to increase the tree canopy. This planned development achieves none of those things. But all of these expectations, they're not elitist. They're all part of the city's comprehensive plan. So altering the neighborhood plan as proposed with this spot zoning amendment only places the NP in conflict with the comprehensive plan's stated goals and strategies, including for medium residential. And even worse, it sets a precedent for higher density in these traditional residential neighborhoods throughout the city at the cost of what makes the quality of these neighborhoods so livable now. I think that a well-planned development on this parcel could meet all of these strategies within the current zoning. So please reject this amendment to the neighborhood plan, which had no neighbor input and no neighborhood meeting. And please reject the PD. And thank you again for considering my public comments.
Thank you, Susan, for your comments. The next speaker is Ann Reynolds on Linden Avenue in Madison in opposition. Ann, you have 3 minutes.
Yes, thank you. I am going to urge the commission to reject both items 10 and 11. Both of them are deviations from the comprehensive plan, and both of them were supported by the same developer. In fact, planning staff wrote to me to when I asked a question, they told me that they were asked to prepare a draft plan amendment to provide, quote, site-specific guidance in response to discussions with the developer. Madison's current comprehensive plan represents a very deliberative and admirable process for receiving community-wide input from residents. And we just heard from planning staff earlier in the update. And we've seen the logo, people-powered planning. I don't need to tell you that, commissioners. But approval of these two proposals, the neighborhood plan amendment and the plan development, would mean a significant deviation from current zoning in my small traditional residential neighborhood. These proposals represent what appears to be a premature effort to deal with a vacant religious building in a traditional residential zoning area, of which there are many. I mean, they're scattered throughout our city. And this is in advance of a deliberative update to the comprehensive plan. On March 27th, a member of the planning staff wrote to me, quote, planning staff would like to take a citywide look at what to do with vacant religious buildings, as this is becoming more common as many congregations decline in size. This will likely be part of our next update to the comprehensive plan, unquote. Items 10 and 11 should not be approved now without citywide discussion as described by the planning staff. I urge you to vote against these amendments tonight, and I thank you for your attention.
Thank you for your comments. The next speaker is Linda Lenertz, opposed, living on South Patterson Street in Madison. Linda, you have 3 minutes. Linda, are you there? Shall we come back for Linda? We have a few more speakers here.
Yeah, it looks like Linda dropped off of the meeting, but was in attendance when you called.
Okay. Well, let's go to the next one and we'll come back for Linda. The next speaker is Rebecca LeBeau on St. Paul Avenue in Madison in support.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, go ahead.
Awesome.
You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, so my name is Rebecca, and I'm here today to voice my support for the Linden Avenue development. I have lived in Sassy for 5 years as a renter in the first floor of an older home just a couple of blocks away from the proposed development. I feel so lucky to live in such a vibrant and connected neighborhood. But in those 5 years, my rent has gone up despite no material changes to the apartment. When I first rented it, it was a 2-bedroom, a little over $1,000. It's now going for close to $1,500. There's very little supply in the housing market, and it keeps costs going up and up and up, even when older stock that is frankly falling apart has no upgrades or changes to keep it safe and healthy to live in. And this is only going to get worse as more and more people move to Madison and continue to drive up that demand. And we know that Madison is one of the most rapidly growing cities in Wisconsin. If we could, my wife and I would buy a house in the neighborhood and live here long term because we love this neighborhood. But we can't actually afford to buy anything in this neighborhood. The cheapest home listed right now is under 1,000 square feet for $350,000, and that will likely go for way over that. That's a mortgage of over $2,500 a month if you can even put 20% down on that. We can't afford that, making almost twice Madison's median household income, which is a very privileged position to be in. How are most people in Madison surviving this rental market and this home market? Who's really going to be able to thrive in Sassy and live here long term if we don't build more housing, all kinds of housing, not just single family homes? This is the reality. It's just not affordable for most people in Madison to live in Sassy, and it's only going to get worse, especially if we don't build more housing. And if the city applies an equity lens, which they should, the people who lose out aren't the people who rent, who have lower incomes, and who are disproportionately people of color, not the people speaking here tonight who already own homes in Sassy. I was 8 years old when the neighborhood plan was last edited. We shouldn't be saying, let's not amend this further. We should be saying, let's overhaul this to meet the needs of this rapidly changing neighborhood. This should be the first of many changes made to accommodate our rapidly growing city and rapidly changing neighborhood. I think it's telling that everyone who is opposed clearly has not been in this rental market or this housing market anytime recently. Madison is growing rapidly, and we need more housing. Of course, we need more than just market price developments like this one. We need more affordable housing too, and we need more protections for tenants and more ways for people to afford homeownership. But I think that approving housing developments like this one is the start we need. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. The next speaker is Tim Shriver on Dunning Street in Madison, opposed. You have 3 minutes.
Chair, there's no person in attendance by that name.
Okay, let's go back to Linda Lenertz, opposed on Patterson Street in Madison. Linda, are you there?
Yes, I am. Thank you. My apologies. Instead of pressing *6, I pressed *3 and it went somewhere else. Anyway, regarding the neighborhood plan amendment, the specification of 3 stories and 70 units is not language that is used when other neighborhood plans have been amended. Generally, an amendment recommends a land use, such as what is said in the adopting resolution of medium residential. Medium residential could support many types of developments with 2 to 5 stories and 20 to 90 units an acre. Better yet would be low medium residential, which the comp plan says is generally compatible in scale with single family homes and may be used as a transition from more intense development. This mitigation language that's in the amendment should be removed. It's in the comp plan. Either that or actual mitigation requirements for this site should be specified. The resolution should be modified to address a future amendment to the comp plan, the generalized future land use map, which was done for the Hansen Plan amendment. In regard to the proposal, UDC gave the initial approval primarily based on sustainability, the achievement of passive house certification. Yet the applicant indicated in UDC testimony that final certification cannot be promised, and that testimony also indicated that final certification was far from certain to happen. This proposal does not promise any sustainability measures other than a filtration rain garden and some balcony greenery, although the architect said more greenery would be on the roof, none is shown on the plans. I don't doubt the applicant's sincerity, but sincerity does not mean that the plan development objective A is met. At a minimum, please make the applicant provide a list of commitments to sustainability. Better yet, require the applicant to obtain design certification of the plans from Passive House Institute US. They can submit the plans, get the certification for the plans, and then whether or not it actually qualifies in the end, but at least then Plan Commission and everybody else would know what sustainability measures are going to be going on here. Basically, it's on this promise of an attempt at passive house certification. The applicant is asking for a building that is a TSS building in form and uses. The zoning text has all of the potential TSS uses, the permitted, the conditional, any accessory uses. And so you're basically allowing a TSS building on a residential street. The staff report under recommended conditions of approval number 1 says, it'll go back and UDC will decide whether the objective A is met. That is not UDC's job. That's Plan Commission's job. UDC makes a recommendation to Plan Commission. And it's up to you to decide whether the sustainability that is in existence or not meets the PD standards. A lot of people have talked about the housing crisis. If this was zoned TRU1, there could be 27 units there versus 32. That still is a large difference in terms of the number of units. And ultimately, 5 fewer units isn't going to make any significant difference to what housing crisis may or may not exist at the moment. Somebody else mentioned that this has already been sold. I would expect that this is like other sales, that it's contingent upon approval, and so nobody's locked in at this moment. So, thank you.
Thank you, Linda. The next individuals do not wish to speak, but they're available to answer. Excuse me?
Chair, we do, and I'm going to speculate that Tim is also there, but we do have Mary Thompson Sherber.
Okay.
And there's also another registrant after that.
Okay, Mary Thomas Shriver on Dunning Street in Madison. Opposed. You have 3 minutes.
Hi, yes, and I also just want to say Tim Shriver is with me right here. He did register to speak, but we didn't know that we had to log in separately for us both to be able to speak.
Okay.
So will he be able to also say his comments?
Have I already called him?
Yes. You called him, but we're on one computer.
That's fine.
Okay.
Should I go first?
You can go first, but I've already called. Tim's already spoke.
No, he didn't speak because we're on the same computer, and so we logged in under my name.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, go ahead. Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I am speaking in opposition to items 10 and 11. I live at 249 Dunning Street across the street from the church and was a member of the core group that met with the developers over the course of several months last summer and fall. While the Krupps and their architect tweaked little details in the design in response to our concerns, they never truly addressed the biggest problems, the scale, massing, and density of the building. In a neighborhood survey conducted last summer, the majority of respondents felt that the density this residential parcel could handle was 20 units max. Most wanted no more than 15 units. We are aware that the city needs more housing, and massive buildings are going up all along East Washington that will be providing hundreds and hundreds of units within just 6 blocks of this parcel. In light of this, it is absurd to think that 12 more units, i.e. the difference between the 32 units Krupps claim are necessary and the 20 units that the neighborhood felt comfortable with, will solve the city's housing crisis. So if the Plan Council does say yes to this, please do not do so because you think this will make much of a dent in the studio, one-bedroom housing availability. And these units will be high rent at that, so they do not align with affordable housing goals. In the mayor's Housing Forward press release of almost exactly a year ago, a plan is laid out to increase the inventory of available housing of all types. One of the stated goals is to invest in home ownership opportunities for people of color with nonprofit partners. The ability to do something to increase home ownership and help people start building generational wealth through equity exists right here. The parcel at 2165 Linden Avenue is perfect for this, as it is already zoned for low-density residential development. I believe the creativity and the tools necessary to do this are there. The city could buy the land and with nonprofit partnerships and perhaps even funding from the Krupps, create smaller units and remain in the current zone. Tyler mentioned to me that there is too little time to do this. However, sometime between the first UDC and the second UDC meeting, Threshold was able to suddenly turn on a dime and try to throw together a passive house plan, which also takes time to do correctly. I've gotten to know Tyler Krupp a bit over this past year, and I've heard him say that he supports goals of increasing affordable housing options, as well as the use of greener technologies in developing land. I have no doubt that his intentions to use green technologies in the future are sincere. I also know that this will not be the last property that Threshold Krupps will develop. I'm sure there is another one right around the corner, literally. And around the corner, on a more trafficked corridor, is where something this scale and size belongs. Not in a TRV1 zoned residential neighborhood with narrow streets and no room for overflow parking or more traffic. This is not the time or place for this sort of development. I am requesting that the Plan Commission vote to reject the application for this oversized development with an undersized plan for actuating green technologies, and instead use the existing zone for this parcel for a project that fits more with the neighborhood feel and the city's stated values. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Can Tim piggyback off me?
Yes, I will give now Tim Shrivers 3 minutes at Dunning Street in Madison opposed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I am opposed to items 10 and 11. In a signed letter from Threshold Principal Tyler Krupp on 12/18/21, he had a signed letter of intent to the neighborhood, and the neighborhood took in good faith the development of the scope, which was demonstrated at 6 to 8 foot step backs from a third to a second story, maximum heights of 40 to 44 feet, and setbacks from the curb at 32, 20, and 22 feet from Division, Linden, and Dunning Streets, respectively. Questions were raised in a meeting at the Urban Design Commission and about the viability of this plan as it pertained to the architectural design and if it was compliant with the comprehensive plans in terms of scale and density. It was determined that the PD could not be used solely for the purpose of increased density, so the intention that this then would be a green technology project was voiced. Subsequently, Threshold Development Principal Tyler Krupp pivoted from his initial design in order to obtain desired density through amending the neighborhood plan and presumed rezoning to a PD via the use of green technology construction, i.e. passive house. Current design iterations were void of the intentions and commitments made to the neighborhood residents concerning the scale, including setbacks from the third story as well as from the curb, and the spirit, also referred to in the letter as preferences of less scale and traditional neighborhood appropriate architecture over contemporary styles. Those issues have also been struck. Remembering that this is supposed to follow the PD, green tech or passive house was not in the original proposal, but a conduit by which these scale and densities could be achieved. In fact, the neighbors in the UDC meetings were told that the current scale of the project is a requisite for green construction. This is not so. I do support the use of green technologies. When they are appropriate in density and scale for the residential communities in which they are built, smaller scale green housing technologies are possible and are currently available and should be explored by Threshold. I submit that the specific proposal falls short for consideration for a PD based on the intent of the builder, as we have seen Threshold's intentions alone are not in and by themselves sufficient to produce a specific product, but are fluid at best. Specific designs and details matter when innovative and unique technologies are implemented. Also, accountability measures must be in place to assure green technologies or passive house are realized. I therefore ask the city to reject this PD based on the fact of underdeveloped ideas and assurances. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Tim. Jesse, are there any other speakers that want to speak?
Yeah, there's one more, Brad Hinkfist in support, District 15, Madison.
Okay. Patrick, is it?
Brad.
Oh, Brad, okay. Brad, you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Yeah, so again, my name is Brad Hinkfist. I have been involved with the neighborhood for years and years, particularly through the Neighborhood Association. I currently chair the Sassy Neighborhood Preservation Development Group. And Sassy has been careful not to take a particular position on this. We typically view our role as one to facilitate engagement, and it was in that spirit that I got involved personally with this. So my opinion is one that I'm stating for myself and not on behalf of the Neighborhood Association. That being said, I was attracted to this project way back when we first heard word of it over a year ago. And I think one of the things that I just want people to understand in considering this is that there have been a lot of allegations about there being no process, or that the process was shut out or very limited or something. I don't think I've ever put more effort, more time into any project in my entire life than trying to facilitate the process around this. There were many meetings, starting with a meeting with over 70 people, which is far more than the average city, even Plan Commission has in attendance. There were a number of big meetings. It came down, there was a focus group you've heard mentioned. I was the one who facilitated all of that, not as a controlling voice or anything, but trying to foster discussion and negotiation between the developer and between the neighborhood. Is my personal sense that there were some significant changes that were made to the design that were concessions to address primary neighborhood concerns. I don't know that all of those concerns were addressed, but there certainly were some very significant ones. But one of the things I noticed is that as certain concerns were addressed, they faded away in importance and other things rose up to be portrayed as the major concerns moving forward. My sense is that there are some really significant things that were gained from this, and people were very involved and very committed to the process all along. This stretched roughly from May through December of last year, with many meetings, almost too many to count. Some of them very large, some of them more focused, and the focus group, which was about 12 people, would report back out to the larger neighborhood. And the larger neighborhood validated that effort and said, please do continue. In the end, there was not a consensus opinion about it. That small group had a split vote and handed it back to the alders. I do feel that the project was impacted significantly through that process. And it was not, had that process not occurred, it would have been a very different project than what you see before you today. And that, as a matter of fact, the PD designation was something that Plan Commission recommended that the developer do in response to a neighborhood concern that had any more generic zoning category be given to the site, that it could be developed to a much higher level. Say if it were done at TSS and not in specific numbers, that PD was a mechanism by which it could be prescribed that only this very, very specific development could occur there. And it was on that basis that PD was put out there. Again, my primary concern is just that there be any notion that there was not a process surrounding this. I didn't give that many hours and that much time of my life to have it be said that there was no process around this and that people weren't engaged, because they were. The other thing that happened, quite frankly, was that some of what transpired through all of that time, which was done in a very collaborative and passionate and very positive sense, was recast in a very negative way and kind of rewritten historically to say that none of this happened and that no one agreed and that no one liked this or no one liked that, when I think it was very much the contrary. Instead, what I've seen is a lot of people have come around saying, we really don't like this when they saw the final result. The process, however, was very, very good and very, very robust. And I would stand by that process again and encourage people to really pay attention at the front end, because the neighborhood plan amendment was forecast as one of the few ways of achieving this project should it come to that. So again, you will do with this what you will. I'm available for questions if there are questions about process. I feel like I was there every step of the way. I feel it's unfortunate that it has come to such negative light, because the group was literally very much, I feel, on the brink of having a consensus opinion about a project that everyone at one point felt very, very good about, or felt like it was an acceptable and a good enough proposal because it was a developer that they were here, that they were speaking with, that they could talk to, as opposed to some unknown quantity at some point in the future. So whatever you make of it, you will. Again, I just want to testify to the authenticity of the process and the fact that there were a great many people engaged. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. We have two individuals that have registered that do not want to speak. One is James Young on Division Street in opposition. And the second one is Brenda Helverson in Cottage Grove, Wisconsin, in support. And again, has registered, does not want to speak, but is available to answer questions. Both she and James Young are available to answer questions. Jesse, are there any other individuals that have registered late to speak?
No, there are not.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Now, let's see, are there any questions for the registrants? Do the Plan Commission members have any questions for the registrants that have spoken? Yes, Commissioner Sondheim.
Thank you. I was wondering if Kevin Burrow could finish his last couple of slides. We were just running through the elevations and renderings.
Sure. Kevin, can you finish your slide presentation on the project?
Yes, I can. Thank you very much for the opportunity to finish up here. So we're just working our way around the building with regards to the exterior design. As I was mentioning, we have designed this to be a townhome look and feel in understanding what that was the main desire of the neighborhood. What I was about to speak to is with regards to the front entry porches. Being a passive house design, as was presented previously, the exterior envelope needs to be extremely efficient and a thermally sound, airtight building. In order to minimize and to maximize the opportunity for that to be successful, we had to simplify the facade to be more of a uniform plane, but through the difference of materials, colors, and textures, we are creating various articulation in the building, and the balconies themselves, being a necessity for an amenity to the building, do pose a potential condition of a thermal bridge, so to speak, which would violate the exterior envelope. So the balconies have been pushed forward towards the sidewalk to create a nice entry porch, and then the second floor unit also has the access out from their unit, but they are self-supporting then, as opposed to being cantilevered out from the building, which again would be a thermal bridging element. So they have become a design feature, some well received by some and not so well received by others. So if we can go to the next slide. So here's another view then, as you can see each of those individual entries and how the articulation varying between the masonry and the siding elements has tried to achieve this individual townhome look, with that third floor being recessed back. Can you go to the next slide, please? So then here's another view on looking towards the end of the building. We have anchored each end of the building with all masonry wrapping all the way around the sides, and then introduced masonry throughout the rest of the front facade as well. Next slide, please. Here's a view then looking back from Division Street towards the building. So even these units on the ends have direct entry and are gauged to the sidewalk. And in the foreground there, behind the two people walking near the corner, that is actually our rain garden area. So you can have a visual and physical touch and feel, so to speak, of one of these stormwater management practices that are being developed for this project. And again, that third floor has been recessed back. If you go to the next slide, please. So here's the view on the back side. So again, we've got access, shared access to the underground parking, and then the balconies on this level have also been extended from the building and are self-supported to minimize the thermal bridging that would occur. And then next slide, please. So here's a final view of this, sort of a bird's eye view, as you can see how the building has stepped back. On the roof terrace at the third floor level, you can see the green roof elements that have been incorporated. We have not shown the quantity of green roof on the main upper roof, as we are still working out the designs and requirements for that. You can see the solar panels that were represented as they place solar, but those are also intended to be as part of this development, as part of the overall design to determine the overall layouts for any photovoltaics, green roof, et cetera, along with any mechanical equipment to occur on the roof. But as you can see in this image, we have done quite extensive landscaping around all sides of the buildings and really engaged with the sidewalk on every facade possible. So those are all the slides that I had to present this evening.
Thank you, Kevin.
Kevin, I have one question. What are the size of the balconies, specifically on the south side of the building?
They average, they are 6 feet by approximately 10 feet.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Fernandez, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have a question for possibly Kevin Burrow or Tyler Krupp.
Okay.
We've heard quite a few comments regarding this being, vague promises of a green building, but no commitment. What can you tell me about specific performance that you expect out of this building? I mean, compared to a conventional design, I can see you've reduced the surface area of the skin of the building by removing the penetrations, et cetera. But can you give me any numbers? I mean, will this be, require 30% less energy than a typical construction? And then specifically, I'm interested in the passive numbers. Will this absolutely incorporate photovoltaics? Will those cover 70% of the energy needs? What can you tell me in terms of numbers to dispel the possibility that this is not actually going to be very different when it's all done?
What I would recommend is that either Tyler or Tim McDonald field these questions, as Tim is our expert for this.
Okay. Tyler, would you like to give the question to Tim, or would you like to take it?
Expectations. I can speak to the intentions around this.
Okay. Is he muted?
No, Tyler, you're coming in very quiet. Could you try and say that again?
I can speak to the intentions around PV and solar on the roof, but I think Tim McDonald would best be able to speak to the performance of passive house buildings. So our intention around the solar, and this is an iterative design process, is once we understand how the building's performing and what's needed in terms of PV to bring it down to net zero ready, that'll determine our solar array on the roof, but we won't be able to make that determination until we model the passive house elements of the building.
Okay. Tim McDonald, would you like to further answer?
Sure. Yeah, I can. I'm very sorry that I couldn't get through my slides, because what I was going to show you was a series of buildings that we've actually developed, designed, and built ourselves, and so these issues become visual. But But let me. I think I'll just stick with the main questions. If you'd like me to show the slides, I can. But but our experience over the past 15 years of doing this specific kind of passive house work is that passive house, when you build to that standard, it gets you 80% more energy efficient than a typical code building. Now that requires some discussion because it depends on what code you have in Madison versus other parts of the country. But the essence is passive house allows you to get to net zero energy with a roof that's large enough to generate the power that the building needs. My experience is that if you don't build to the passive house standard, then the load reductions, the energy load reductions, will never be enough so that the solar can generate what the building needs. So what I would say on this project, because we've just been engaged, we're very excited. Tyler and his team are 100% committed to building a passive house building, but we need to get engaged more rigorously in this. But what I will say is this, that the roof will be fully filled with solar. We've done exactly the same. We've had green roofs plus solar on our projects to get them to net zero. And I think Tyler's and their team is committed to the same thing. What I will also say is that there is a significant difference between LEED and passive house, because passive house is very much focused on energy consumption, whereas LEED as a sustainability strategy is a kind of holistic strategy about sustainability. And so if somebody is interested in passive house, they're interested in carbon neutrality. They're interested in net zero energy. They're interested in generating the amount of energy that the building needs to survive on its own site. And I think that's exactly what this team is interested in doing.
Commissioner Fernandez, does that answer your question?
A little bit. It largely does. I'd like to ask for a little better definition of the net zero ready versus net zero. And about the certification. So there is actually a certification that this building could receive at the design stage, or would it have to be built? I mean, what would keep us from requiring for this approval that the building meet a passive certification?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, it's a great question. And here's what passive house is about. Unlike LEED, passive house requires a performance-based approach, which means that you go through the process of schematic design, design development, construction documents. You must have it certified at the design level, and Tyler and his team are absolutely committed to that, to certifying the project at the design level. What does that mean? It means that you have to do an energy model. It means that you have to do a series of drawings that demonstrate that the envelope is exactly what the energy model says. And when it is approved at the design level, then the construction documents follow based on that design. The challenge when it comes to passive house is that one of the key requirements is that there's an air tightness requirement at the end of the project. The project has to be fully built, and then you essentially, it's called a blower door test. You blow the building up with a fan, and you measure how much air leakage there is in that building. And a passive house, if a passive house is nothing, it is a super insulated and airtight building. And so you have to know exactly how airtight that building is in order to meet the passive house standard, in order to actually get certification. And so one of the challenges with Passive House is that you even if you've been what's called pre-certified at the design stage, and then you do all of the drawings to meet that standard, it is sometimes difficult to hit the blower door test. And when I say hit it, I mean I've seen people miss it by a fraction, but that fraction means that they don't get certification. And so Tyler and his team has told us that they are totally committed to going through the entire certification process. And they're actually very much interested in certification, but that certification actually only happens after you hit that blower door test at the end of the project. They are 100% committed to everything up to that moment, and they want that blower door test to happen. They want that air tightness test to be positive, but that's why they're saying certification is impossible to guarantee, because if you miss it by 0.1%, then you're not certified, even though it's a building that is more airtight by 10 times than the building across the street from it. So it's still a very, very efficient building, but that air tightness requirement as a performance requirement is unlike LEED. LEED does not require you to do that.
Commissioner Fernandez, I would just add, my guess is if you made approvals contingent upon final certification, I don't know a developer who would even attempt this if that were the condition.
Well, I'll make it clear. I'm interested in certification at the design level. Obviously, it can't be contingent on a test that's after the building's already built.
Right.
That obviously
Yeah, right.
that's not. Okay, thank you. That answers my question for the moment, anyway.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Fernandez. Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. This is also for Tim McDonald. The vast majority of what I was going to ask has already been answered, but could you remind us, you obviously know what you're talking about, but could you remind us of your credentials and how you intersect with the development team?
Sure. So I'm an architect, developer, and builder. We started in our company in 1997, so we've been in business for 25 years. And for the majority of that time, we have been focused on building, quote, sustainable buildings. And that began with LEED, gold, and platinum buildings. And for the past 12 years has been 100% focused on passive house construction. Because what I realized as a responsible architect is that in the same way that I'm not going to design a building that will collapse and kill people, it is irresponsible of me to design a building that contributes to the climate crisis. And so we have devoted our last 15 years to doing nothing other than passive house, net zero energy buildings. And in that light, we have been designing and building not just our own projects, but many, many client buildings as well, large and small. And at the same time, I also realized that we are not going to solve the climate crisis one building at a time. And so we started an initiative in 2014 to get affordable housing finance agencies across the country to promote passive building technologies. And I'll just summarize that experience by saying that the Pennsylvania Housing Finance Agency over the past 8 years has approved the design and building of over 1,000 units of affordable housing built to the passive house standard. And they have done it because they have seen that not only is it possible, but it's possible within everyday construction budgets. We then took that initiative to the country at large. And to date, we have approached 40 housing finance agencies across the country, and 18 housing finance agencies have included passive house building technologies in their funding structures to support this effort. And 14 more states, even though it's not in their financing structures, have been encouraging developers to build passive house buildings, and those buildings are happening across the country. And so we're not just architects, developers, and builders, but we're also trying to promote this effort at a policy level nationwide. And so there's a real movement for the affordable and market rate multifamily housing world to build to the passive house standard.
Thanks. That's impressive. And how again does that relate to this project? Are you the architect or?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yes. So we are the design architect on the project, with the architect of record being Kevin and his team. So it's a collaborative effort. We're doing this in multiple states. And the reason why we're doing this is because there aren't a lot of architects across the country that have the experience to start from the beginning, from the schematic and design development, to really direct the project towards a passive house project. And so we've been asked by multiple developers across the country to help them to get their projects to be passive house certified projects. And the way we do that, the most effective way that we do that, is that we join the team as the design architect, working with the local architect of record.
Okay, thank you. Just one more question. Do you have concerns about local contractors and labor that will be used to potentially build this building? Is there the expertise in the community, given that some of the construction techniques might be unique, or are these skills that you think are easily obtainable?
That's also a great question. It's been a concern of ours since we started doing this work, over a decade ago. And the way we addressed that question was to do two things: come up with a strategy that is as simple as possible from a construction perspective as well as a mechanical systems perspective, and secondly, to focus on prefabrication as much as possible. So between hyper simple construction envelope strategies and mechanical strategies, as well as prefabrication strategies, we're able to eliminate a lot of the training requirements that are needed to kind of bring GCs up to scale. And those strategies involve modular building as well as panelized building. And the panelized building, and some of those examples I was going to show, but I didn't have enough time, have to do with the most difficult part of a passive house, which is the envelope, the exterior envelope. And there are companies that we have been working with for over 10 years that deliver the envelope as a prefabricated, with windows and doors installed, to the site with everyday carpenters and builders that have no experience with passive house. And within a couple of hours, we train them on site, or frankly in the factory. And so your question is a really large one, but it's one that we have attacked very rigorously for the past 10 years.
All righty. Thank you. That's my question. Unless maybe Tyler wanted to add an answer to my question, if that's okay, Chair.
Sure. Tyler?
Alder Heck, I just wanted to acknowledge we share your concern about whether the trades and contractors in town can execute this. And To address that, about a year ago, we started a conversation with Krupp General Contractor, who's our usual partner, about their willingness to move in this direction. And they made a commitment to that. And that's a commitment to really learn and master Passive House together. They've committed a bunch of man hours to it. We've done, I think, 7 or 8 hours of workshops with Elizabeth Turner at Precipitate. They've really given probably 50 to 60 hours of their staff's time to learning this, and they're really committed to learning this with us. And I would say the same about Nothly Bruce. The architects committed a lot of time and resources to learning this. And we reached out to Tim as one way for our team to sort of upskill and learn this on this project, but also for future projects.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tyler and Tim. Commissioner Spencer, do you have a question?
Thank you. Thanks. Just a couple questions about Passive House. Just wondering about building in the Passive House style, how much more expensive, if it is more expensive to do that. Just, very briefly curious about that. And then thinking about the energy efficiency and energy savings, is that then passed along to the renter or the owner, to the consumer long term? Is there some way to translate those savings? I think I saw Passive House is very popular in, Northern Europe, Sweden, Switzerland, where I imagine a lot of things in housing are subsidized. Excuse me. Just wondering how that translates here.
Good question. Who would like to answer that, Tim or Tyler?
Either one.
Okay.
Both. Thanks.
I think Tim's best situated to answer that.
Well, okay. I'll answer the first part, and then I think the strategy for utility savings is really a developer question, because we have, I'll just say this, as developers, we have done, the way we've done it is we've said, if we've got a very large solar array, which we have on all of our buildings, the question is who gets the savings of that energy production? And the way we've done it is we've said, we are going to have one meter, a master meter for the entire building. We're not going to have individual meters for apartments. And we're going to charge tenants a fixed rate for utilities. And in 2 projects of a very similar scale, a 25-unit project and a 28-unit project that we completed recently over the past couple of years, we are charging tenants between $40 and $50 a month for all utilities. That is about half of what any tenant in the neighborhood that we're working in gets charged for utilities, whether they have their own meter or not. So number one, it benefits the tenants, but number 2, it benefits the developer because you have a renewable energy plant on your roof, and so it benefits both. But what I will say, I'll back up to answer. So Tyler's got to answer that question about where utility savings go and whether there's a master meter or individual meters. That's a larger conversation. But when it comes to the, what was the first question about energy efficiency?
My second question was, about energy efficiency and passing those savings along. So I appreciate your comment about the meters and the flat rate for tenants. My first question, I just had a general question about how much more, if it's more expensive to build.
Oh, right. Cost.
Passive House versus standard.
Correct. Yeah. And that's a question that involves me showing you a lot of data that demonstrates what we believe. And we believe, and we have demonstrated for years, that we build buildings that use 75 to 80% less energy within the budgets that developers typically have for code-built buildings. Now, that's us as developers, architects, and builders. But for a client like Tyler, I think you're probably in the neighborhood of between 0 and 5% additional cost for building to the passive house standard. That's what we've seen over the many projects that we've built for ourselves as well as for clients.
Okay, thank you.
Tyler, would you like to add any information on the question?
I just add Tim's being modest here. I think part of the reason we hired Tim was we're pretty sure without someone like Tim in our market, this is probably more like a 5 to 12% cost increase. We're really hoping that Tim can help us sort of speed up the learning curve in our market to bring these cost increases down to more like what he's describing. But there's significant risk around it, and I'm really grateful Joe's willing to take this risk and that our team is willing to try and learn this, but we're expecting a learning curve where the costs start out significantly higher and come down.
And the savings on utility cost would, have you thought about, 1 meter as Tim indicated, or?
We've definitely thought about it, and part of that conversation is around what's permissible in the state of Wisconsin.
Sure.
So we've had long conversations with MG&E, and it's fairly discouraging in terms of what's possible. I think there's some unique conditions here, but we want to explore that further before we make a decision on our metering options.
Thank you for the answer. Any other questions for any of the registrants? Seeing none, then I'm going to close the public hearing. And are there questions for staff? Do any of them? Yes, Commissioner Fernandez.
Thank you. So I think probably a question for Colin. One thing that has come out over the course of these comments is that actually staff seems to have recommended PUD as possibly a kind of a benign recommendation that would limit the density on the site as opposed to just recommending a particular zoning. I'll say at the outset, I'm a little uncomfortable with the PUD designation. Tell me, what are the liabilities of the other possible zoning choices here, and and particularly in terms of how many units would be lost. I mean, could you be at low medium? I know that's not a zoning designation, but you'll have to help me out on this. But if the plan said, low medium instead of saying 3 stories and 70 units, what would be the result of that? In other words, tell me why staff would like to see this as a PUD rather than choose a different zoning category.
Yeah, gladly. And I think there's some some background to the discussion that Brad Hinkfus alluded to, that this went through a number of different neighborhood meetings, several different design iterations, and staff did look at several different districts. I think TRV2, traditional residential varied 2, was one that we looked at. That one tied a lot more closely to what LMR in the comp plan would be on a site of this size. That would be, I think, about 12 or 13 units, 13 probably. There's the TRU1 district, gets a lot closer here. That would end up at about 27-ish 27-ish units. And both of those would be conditional uses under TRV2 and TRU1. There's also the NMX district, neighborhood mixed use, for a residential. For residential use, there wouldn't be a density limit, but those buildings are capped at 24 units. And the other issue with the NMX is that would introduce a number of permitted commercial uses, as well as probably several conditional uses that could be commercial as well. So those were kind of the things that we had looked at. Above TRU1, you get to TRU2, in which the maximum height permitted is 5 stories. That's the same as it is in TRU1. So while it doesn't allow the same number of units that would be permitted in this rezoning to the PD, it would allow a much taller building. And I think one of those things that we had talked about was that keeping a more transitional scale from the 4-story building on Atwood to the single-family homes to the north, keeping that at 3 stories would be preferable to allowing 5 stories. So I think those are the main things, that going above TRU1, you would allow a much greater density. NMX would allow commercial uses. TRU1 itself would allow a much taller building. And then TRV2 would be the next step down, as I mentioned, but that would be a reduction of units, from the 32 that's proposed down to 13, which is a considerable difference. The discussion about PD as an option came out because, as we talked about, changes to the plan amendment, or changes to the plan, looking at medium residential, which would allow up to 6 stories and 90 units an acre, and some of those different districts, the heights of the U districts, having a PD enables the city to really constrain what that development is to what is proposed. Were this site to be rezoned to TRU1, and threshold development ends up not being able to put together financing, or for some other reason not building the building, the lot would be TRU1 and a 5-story building could be built here. So that uncertainty was something that the neighbors that were in those meetings wanted to avoid, and that was one of the reasons to go to the planned development district.
Does that answer your question?
It pretty much does, Colin. I just want to make sure I understand then that a TRV2 would be a very huge reduction in the number of units. The next step up would be a TRU1, and while that would only permit 27 units, it could permit 5 stories without a conditional use. So is that correct? So if this development, if you rezone to TRU1 and this development fell through for whatever reason, another developer could propose 5 stories at that point without even needing a conditional use.
It's
stating that correctly, more or less?
4 stories as a permitted use, 5 as a conditional use.
Right. Okay. Yep. Okay. So,
but otherwise, you are correct.
So the use of PUD actually is establishing a maximum height at 3 stories.
Yes, the PD approval will reflect the plans that are proposed, and not more than that.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Shepard, do you have a question?
Yeah, Colin, in the staff report under conditions, condition number 1, could you explain again, for clarity, the benefit in that condition? It reads, once again, that the benefits, if you could explain the benefit of allowing the applicant to appeal a UDC decision to the Plan Commission as it relates to sustainability?
Yeah. So, yes. So that's just built into the zoning code that the recourse for someone at UDC is to appeal to the Plan Commission. So, assuming things go well, the UDC makes their findings and everyone is happy with what the UDC does. If the applicant finds that they cannot abide by what the UDC has found, then their recourse is to appeal to the Plan Commission.
Okay, and should this be as the only issue I have here maybe is because we've talked a lot about passive housing and that sort, those standards, and there's nothing in here about those standards. Is that something that is that already sort of in the code? Is that baked in here, or is that these different types of certification? Is that something that should or needs to be spelled out, or does again the code basically cover that?
I think if the commission would really like to see something related to a certification beyond what the UDC will be looking at, because the UDC will not, require proof of passive house certification or anything. If the commission does want to see something like that, I think it's within your wheelhouse to add that as a condition. Staff can obviously help with kind of wording that. But I think we would have our building inspection and building permitting staff review that certification and those plans, probably with final approval by the director of building inspection.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. This is probably for Colin. We had some comments and public input about the neighborhood plan amendment, and indicating that some folks felt that there were greater policy issues being addressed in this neighborhood plan amendment, particularly with respect to buildings that are, places of worship, as this one currently is, in ending the, approaching the end of their life, and also greater statements about in the future other institutional buildings reaching the end of their building life cycles, et cetera. Do you think it is a little unusual for those to be in a neighborhood plan amendment, because they're kind of making statements about the city at large, it seems?
I think when we put together the text for the neighborhood plan, we did kind of think about the rest of the neighborhood, and this is, like you said, something that is citywide. And while I don't think that what is in the neighborhood plan is untrue, we tried to do our best to tailor the actual recommendations to this site. As one of the speakers during the public hearing mentioned, staff would like to take a more holistic review of the institutional uses across the city and their reuse, and that will be something that we do in the next comprehensive plan. As you are probably aware, opening up the comprehensive plan to make those changes is a very time and effort intensive undertaking, and so it's not something that we can just do right now. We need to do those things together. So I back to the neighborhood plan. There are actually two versions on the Legistar page. There is a substitute, which Alder Foster can talk about potentially, but it is really cut down to focus more on this specific site and remove some of the discussion about places of worship, schools, other institutions, and their reuse. So we're attempting at least to really focus it on the site on Linden Avenue.
Thanks. I must have been looking at the wrong version, so we can talk about that later. Thanks for the information.
Commissioner Fernandez?
No, I'm sorry. I forgot to take my hand back down.
Okay. I guess question for Colin. Is it possible for the Plan Commission to see that second version? If that's because one of the motions tonight, we're going to be considering the neighborhood plan amendment, and if there's an amendment to the amendment that we're considering, should we be considering that or considering what we read?
Yes, certainly. I can bring both of them up. If you will give me one moment.
While Colin's finding it, I just want to make sure that it's clear that the substitute is what's before you, and it's on Legistar also. So Colin can bring it up now, but it is before the Plan Commission formally.
Okay, so the substitute. Okay.
All right, so you should be seeing Legistar item 69937. Item or attachment 1 was the original draft amendment.
Okay.
Item 2 is the substitute. So I have these both up here. This is the first one. It is 2 pages or so. This is the substitute. It removes several of the paragraphs that discuss kind of the institutional uses in general, and specifically focuses just on Zion Lutheran Church, and then transitions to residential areas.
Okay.
But the substitute is what is in front of the commission right now.
Okay, so this one is much more tailored to the Zion Lutheran site, with the 70 dwelling units per acre and the 3-story limit.
That is correct.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other questions for staff? And we need to consider the plan amendment first. So if there are specific questions on that, or if there's a motion on that, we need to address that first, and then we can address the development that we've had most discussion on. Yes, Commissioner Fernandez.
Amendment does include consideration of setbacks. How does that relate to this specific development? To me, and more specifically, I guess, how do the setbacks that are being required of this development on Linden relate to the existing setbacks on Linden?
Colin, I'm sorry, Commissioner Fernandez, I kind of cut your first statements off, but could you ask the question again? I know we're wondering about the setbacks compared to the other buildings within the neighborhood, the setbacks?
Yes, the resolution that we're acting on today lists setbacks as one of the considerations. How do the setbacks on Linden for this proposal relate to the setbacks on Linden today, the existing setbacks?
Okay, thank you. Colin?
Yeah, are you referring to the kind of the setbacks of the residential buildings across the street, the single family homes?
Yes.
So the setbacks of the proposal are generally, or at least along Linden, are, I believe, about 8 to 9 feet. I can't say for sure what the setbacks of the single family residences across the street are under their zoning districts. It's more than that. I would posit probably about 15 feet. So the setback will be somewhat smaller. I think in most cases when staff makes comparisons like that, we look at things on the same block face. So it's not typically a something that we will
right.
take a really in-depth look at when it's across the street.
Right. You don't really have block faces on that same side. Okay, thank you.
If I could just jump in here quickly, I just wanted to show this particular interface here. So we have, this is the church, Zion Lutheran Church site here. And you can see across the street to the north, it faces the sides of these two single family homes. Colin's estimate of 15 feet is probably really close, but it's the sides of the single family homes and their garages that the building would be facing to the north. Not sure if that's helpful. Just wanted to be sure that is clear. And then as you go down Linden to the west, these setbacks to the sides and fronts of the single family homes along Linden to the west are probably about the same, probably about 10, 15 feet in the front. So the proposed setback is tighter at 8 feet, is tighter than, of course, the single family homes in the area.
Okay, thank you. Very helpful. Very helpful.
Are there other questions? I thought I saw some raised hands, but maybe I didn't. Are we ready for a motion on the neighborhood plan amendment? Yes, Commissioner Sondheim.
Yes, I will move that the Plan Commission approve and recommend to the Council approval of the Sassy Neighborhood Plan Amendment with the substitute.
Thank you. Do we have a second to the motion? Second by Commissioner Heck. Would you like to speak to your motion, Commissioner Sondheim?
Just briefly, thank you. I just want to say, as was echoed by some of the speakers, I think this neighborhood plan has served the area well for over 20 years. There's certainly been a lot of development. It did not contemplate every possible scenario, particularly for institutional uses like this, nor do I think it should. This is, an opportunity with the parcel becoming available to provide infill housing and address some of our sustainability goals with a really innovative approach. I think that this supports so much of the other work that we're doing as a city in terms of public transportation, sustainability. And, there's a bit of a narrative, which I can understand, that this amendment is just so specific and really calls out one parcel. But I actually think of it kind of in an opposite way, as this is an opportunity to take some of our broader goals that are in the comprehensive plan and other documents and implement them on this parcel. So that is why I am supporting this amendment.
Thank you. Commissioner Heck, would you like to speak? No. Okay. So I'll assume unanimous consent on the motion unless I see a raised hand. Commissioner Fernandez, would you like to speak? Sorry.
I would, thank you. Would it be appropriate to offer an amendment at this point?
Sure. Amendment to the motion, sure.
An amendment to the motion, yes. So, I feel that many of the comments were well taken by me. I think there was some very cogent things put forward by many of the opponents of this, and in particularly that the only justification for a PUD is innovative energy performance. I mean, there are other possible ones, but this is left with that as far as I'm concerned.
Commissioner Fernandez, is your amendment pertaining to the development and proposal or for the neighborhood plan amendment? Because our first motion is just for the neighborhood plan amendment, and then we're going to have a separate motion on the development.
I would say yes.
Okay.
And what I would like to offer is that that we would change to add to 30 units, 70 units, 3 stories, and meeting passive house certification requirements at the design level. So if we're going to be very specific that we are that that this is becoming a PUD because of its thermal performance and its innovative things, then if we're going to be that specific with regard to the size and the number of units and the height, we should be equally specific about its energy performance. So I would suggest that the wording for that be something like, and a building meeting passive home certification requirements at the design level. Obviously, we can't require the certification, the post-construction air tightness test. But I think that this thing it shouldn't become a PUD if it doesn't. Of course, I hear what you're saying. The PUD is really perhaps the next question.
Yeah, the PUD is we're going to be looking at the rezoning to PUD. So I think that would be most appropriate in the next motions on 11 probably that the Plan Commission will have to take. If you agree with that. Or we could ask staff.
I think I do. I guess I do. I would still like to include some kind of wording that it will be an exceptionally energy efficient building, but perhaps staff advise me. Maybe it's inappropriate for the plan revision.
Okay. Heather, would you like to comment? Sorry.
Sure. I do think it would be most appropriate along with the rezoning to the PD. I think that in a plan amendment, we're already entering a territory that's much, much more specific than perhaps we would normally be. And so I'm comfortable with the level of specificity in the amendment as drafted, but I do think that from what I've heard from the Plan Commission's discussion, the best place to put a condition like that would actually be associated with the plan development, because then it can hang with the development as it moves forward.
Thank you. I'm comfortable with that. I appreciate that advice.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second, and we'll assume unanimous consent to the motion unless I see a raised hand in opposition. I see no raised hands, so the motion to approve the substitute amendment to the neighborhood plan is approved. Moving on to the next items, 11, 12, and 13. Is there a motion on those items collectively? Yes, Commissioner Sondheim?
I will move that the Plan Commission find that the standards for a PD have been met and for the zoning map amendment for 2165 Linden Avenue from TRV1 to amended PD GDP to the Common Council with a recommendation of approval. Also that we find that the demolition standards have been met and forward the CSM to the council as well.
Staff, do we need any additional findings of fact for the PDD standards, Heather, or is that adequate?
It would be beneficial to cite a couple certain standards that are met.
Okay.
Yes, I was going to comment on that, but I can do that now as well. That works. Okay. I'm not as practiced at this, Brad, as you. Okay. I do find that the conditions of PD have been met, including A, E, and F, particularly due to the infill nature of the congregation site and the sustainability features.
Thank you. Do we have a second to the motion? Yes. Second by Commissioner Heck. Would you like to speak to the motion, Commissioner Sondheim?
I'll just briefly add specific to this proposal. I think, again, as I stated, I do believe that the standards have been met. I think that staff does a great job at guiding proposals to a more specific standard zoning district. But there are a couple of cases when the PD zoning really actually makes it a better project and better for the neighborhood. I think this is that case. I like the circulation. I think that the way that the parking entrance is, and it has plenty of parking for the neighborhood. The height really transitions well to the single family and 1 and 2 unit buildings around it. I like the townhouse style as well. I just want to say I think that activates Linden Avenue. As we mentioned, the opposite side of the street has primarily side yards and garages. So I think that part of the design as well. I look forward to seeing kind of the final design tweaks with UDC.
Thank you. Commissioner Heck, would you like to speak to the second? No. Okay. Commissioner Fernandez, do you have an amendment?
I do.
Okay.
And the amendment would be that that we find that condition A has been met, provided the building meets the energy efficiency standards of
passive house.
Passive house at the design level.
Okay.
And I'm open to that. Some improved wording of that by staff, should they?
Okay. Heather or Colin, would you like to weigh in on the wording?
Yeah. Kind of in anticipation of that, I had been thinking about this. So please, Commissioner Fernandez, let me know if something like this works, that the applicant obtain passive house design certification prior to final sign off, with review and approval of design certification materials and award by the Director of Building Inspection.
That certainly meets my intent. I'm not completely clear whether passive house has they have a separate design certification. If they have a separate design certification, then that certainly meets my my intent.
Yeah, it's my understanding that there is a design certification, and then beyond that is the full certification, which we heard the discussion about the blowing test,
right?
And we would not be able to condition something on right. That final that final state. So I think this would be a good way to go about meeting the intent of your amendment.
Yeah, thank you, Colin. That definitely expresses the intent of my amendment.
Okay, let's have on the amendment. Let's have a vote on the amendment first, I think. Or Commissioner Heck, go ahead.
Thank you. Given the potential repercussions of this proposed amendment, I'd like to request that we reopen the public hearing and ask the applicant if they feel this is even doable.
Okay, good suggestion. Unless I see a raised hand to object, I'll open the public hearing. And ask would be Tyler Krupp, I'm assuming would be the developer. Yes. Tyler, can you respond to that, the proposed amendment?
Question is whether this would be possible.
Yes.
If Tim's still here, I'd like him to weigh in. My understanding is it's not only possible, but we're already headed down that path. If it's limited to design certification, that's a part of the process we've already headed down.
Yes, that's at least the intent. Tim McDonald, would you like to confirm that?
Yes, that is in fact the case. It's actually called pre-certification, and it's what every project has to go through Passive House Institute US.
Okay. Thank you. We'll add the word pre-certification, I think. But let's have a vote on an amendment. First of all, do we have a second to the amendment? I'm assuming we have to have a second to the amendment. Second by Commissioner Hagenow. So I'll assume unanimous consent on the amendment to the motion, and then we'll vote on the motion. Assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand. I see no raised hands. The amendment is approved unanimously. We'll move to the motion now. We have a motion on the floor to find the proposed development consistent with the plans and the rezoning and the survey and the demolition consistent with the standards, and a second, and I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand in opposition. Seeing no raised hands, the motion is approved unanimously. Thank you. We'll now move to the last item on our agenda. Item number 20 is Legistar 70668, confirming the format of the Plan Commission meetings from June through December 2022. I guess what I'd like to have is at least comments by the Plan Commission. Would you like to consider continue the Zoom meetings until the end of the year? I know that the chair would like to do that. I guess I'm a little bit more looking at an incremental approach, maybe considering it Zoom until September and then reconvening and thinking about it, and maybe extending it if we need to, and if COVID has come back more vigorously than it is now, or but anyway, I'd like to get a consensus of the Plan Commission. What would you like to see, Commissioner Shepherd?
I'll just make the comment. Yes, I think we should continue online. For one major reason is that it's more accessible to people. I understand if we go back to face-to-face, we may have a hybrid sort of situation, but I think for right now, remaining online with the meetings would be preferable. Thank you.
Would you like, I guess the question is, would you like to extend it through the end of the year, or would you like to revisit it midway?
When it gets cold again, yes, I would. And I
okay.
Have downtown, yes.
Okay, so you'd like to extend it to the end of the year. Okay.
Yes.
Commissioner Sondheim.
I guess I'm fine either way in terms of September, end of the year. I'd just add to that, in addition to what Commissioner Shepherd mentioned about increased participation from the public, I also appreciate that it allows some of the consultants that present, architects, engineers, the ability to just log on without, flying across the country to talk for 3 minutes. That's good on a number of levels. So I think either way that we end up, I'd like to maintain that flexibility.
Thank you. Commissioner Heck. Go ahead.
Thank you. I'm okay either way also, but I would maybe I lean a little bit towards reassessing around the beginning of September, because I know Common Council is considering going back in person, at least for some meetings, and testing this new hybrid capability that City IT has been working on. And it might be worth our discussing it in September, because I think some of the good reasons that have already been brought up could possibly be accommodated. People could be accommodated, people giving testimony, applicants, architects, public input through that new hybrid meeting process. But I think we're not exactly sure what that will consist of yet. So it could be worth talking about it in September.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Fernandez.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to second both Commissioner Solheim and Commissioner Heck on both those points. I don't mind if we reconsider in September, but I strongly feel that we need to somehow maintain the virtual option for people. If we have an acceptable hybrid solution come September and it's been test driven by the council, yeah, I would consider going back in person. But I really feel it's very important for us to maintain at least that hybrid condition.
Thank you. Commissioner Shepard. Or Spencer, sorry.
Okay. Thank you. I also agree with reassessing in September. As much as I don't really love the Zoom meetings and the frustrations with the technology that I know I can have and some other people can have, it's been a very, family and illness friendly format. I can still participate in the meetings where I know there have been nights it would have been a challenge to get downtown. And also, I remember a while ago, 1 or more years ago, somebody mentioning closed captions for the meetings. Has that been implemented? Has there been closed caption for these meetings and council meetings? That would be a nice feature. There haven't? No.
I don't know. That's a good question for staff.
But I like the hybrid, and I would love for a closed caption feature. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Shepard.
Yeah, just to follow up on a couple of points there. The closed captioning, actually, this is from my experience teaching. Closed captioning is actually, it should be required, once again, for ADA and that sort of thing. The other quick point I'll just make is that I think between now and September and going to once again, toward the end of the year, if we can get reports from other city boards and commissions that they're using, once again, the hybrid option, what is that experience like? The reason I mention this is just because I teach face-to-face, online, and in hybrid. And there were great expectations in terms of the hybrid format. But in reality, you find that, for many people, for myself, for many students, they've made the switch. They either want to be, and we're still going through the process. Again, I'm not saying this is sort of settled law or anything, but for many students, they don't want something lukewarm. For many of them, it's if they're going to be in the building, they want to be there all day, and that's it. For others, they see online. So I guess my general point here is that if we can get information leading up to September and the end of the year, what are other commissions and boards experiencing with something like hybrid, I think that would help us. But I would caution us to avoid, once again, this expectation that hybrid is going to sort of be the best of both worlds. That may not simply be the case. Thank you.
Okay. Well, one of the things that I miss is the physical interaction with the commission members. We have a lot of new members, and I've I haven't met any of them, and except you, Commissioner Shepherd, but since you've been on before, but so I miss that, and I think that my personal feeling is that I'd like to at least let's extend the Zoom, and let's see how the council works with this hybrid approach. And maybe September or the end of September, we'll reassess it. And if then we feel that going back or continuing as we are is appropriate, we can extend it then. But anyway, it might allow at least the test case with the city council and other, maybe other committees might join in too by that point in time. So, Commissioner Fernandez, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to second that comment too. As one of the new members, I have not met anybody here except staff, and I miss that. I definitely agree with that heartily. So one possibility might be the quarterly meetings at which we don't have votes or public hearings, we hold in person. And that would allow us to get some, sense of cohesion and whatever. And so just a thought to add into the stew.
Okay, good thought. Heather, would you like to weigh in on any of this discussion? But if I can be so bold, I would say the consensus is that let's continue this format until September 1, if you feel that's appropriate, and then reassess it and at that point in time.
That sounds great from staff's perspective. I think we're ready to support whatever way the commission wants to move forward. Not aware of really many boards, committees, or commissions who have resumed in person, and I think a lot of them are waiting for the council to do so to kind of learn and see how that goes. And so I anticipate that, when the council switches, that perhaps could happen as soon as June. And we'll find out more about the technology, and it seems like a really good timeline to me to revisit it in the early fall.
Great. If that's okay with the other commission members, if not, raise your hand, please, and we'll go for a different direction. Okay, seeing no raised hands. Thank you much. The next item of business is business by members. This is the last meeting of Jason Hagenau. And Jason, you've been on the commission now for 5 years, I believe. And we've been through a lot on this commission. We've adopted a new comprehensive plan and reviewed and approved thousands of new housing units. And it's been a good gig, at least thus far. And we appreciate your presence and your experience as a property manager of affordable housing. I think that provides a perspective that many of us, especially me, I don't have that background at all. So that provided at least some background that added to our discussion. So we greatly appreciate that. And Heather or anyone else that on the commission would like to thank Commissioner Hagenau, and we hope you have a good tenure and Monday nights free, so that you can enjoy your family time then. But thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much for that. I think I'm blushing a little bit now. So, thank you, everybody. It really has been a great experience, and I hope at some point in the future to circle back to it again. I'll just leave it at that. Thank you all.
Thank you. I'm sure city staff would enjoy that. And there's plenty of other city committees that you can serve on. I'm sure that maybe they'll put you on a revolving list of committees. So thanks again. Heather, Secretary's report.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Cantrell, and thanks for chairing the meeting again this evening. Well, I want to echo the comments. Jason, from a staff perspective, just want to thank you so much for your time over the last 5 years. It's a lot to give. All of you give so much to this city with your attention, thoughtfulness, and we really appreciate it. Wish we could see you off in person, and maybe we can, reconvene at some point to see each other and see you off. But I really, really appreciate your time. So thank you. And I did want to let the commission know that the mayor has appointed Commissioner Shepard to serve as a full-time voting member starting at the end of May. So that should, pending approval by the council on May 10th, that role will be filled. And then, I mean, in other sad news, I think we have Alder Limmer for one more meeting. I really hope we do. But I reached out to Alder Limmer immediately upon hearing her news. Alder, you will be sorely missed by planning division staff. I know in your role as Alder and Plan Commissioner. So thank you too. And we can say it all again, hopefully at our next meeting as well. But just wanted to acknowledge that for folks.
Thank you.
Sure. Looking ahead, well, first of all, the council did move ahead with the Plan Commission recommendations at their last meeting, including without a word, the approval of the Town of Cottage Grove intergovernmental agreement, which is a really important way to really set our long-term growth area on the Far East side. And so it went very quietly, but took a lot of staff time and effort, and really appreciate having that certainty on our Far East side. Upcoming matters, just a few highlights on the May 9th meeting. The one I'll mention is on the 500 block of West Washington Avenue, the demolition of 9 existing buildings to construct a 140-unit 6-story building. And then on May 23rd, we'll have a special item, and that will be the election of chair and vice chair, and then also appointments of plan commissioners to the Transportation Planning and Policy Board and the Joint Campus Area Committee, which Jason has also been serving on in recent years. And then the other one that I'll mention on May 23rd is on the 600 block of East Mifflin and East Dayton, sort of bridging those two streets, demolition and construction of a new 55-room hotel with a restaurant included. So that will be kind of, the most significant development proposal before the commission in late May. And that is where I'll leave it for this evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. The next item is announcements. Do any of the commission members have any announcements? Seeing none. Adjournment. Do we have a motion to adjourn? Motion by Commissioner Hagenow. Do we have a second to the motion? And we have second by Commissioner Sondheim. I'll assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand. Seeing no raised hands, adjournment is unanimously approved. And thank you again. And good night.